Hey truckers, today we're seeing part 8 of Reincarnation of the Businesswoman at School. Let's dive into the video. It wasn't because Gu Ning was familiar with the woman, but because of Gu Ning's outstanding memory. Once she had paid attention to something, she could easily keep it in mind. Within several seconds, two beautiful, noble ladies walked inside. One of them was Hao Ran's mother, Mrs. Hao, who had met Gu Ning once at Master Qin's birthday party. And the other female voice was Mrs. Liu. The lady beside Mrs. Hao had also seen Gu Ning at Master Qin's birthday party, but they hadn't spoken to each other. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Hao, Mrs. Liu." Gu Qing and Gu Man immediately welcomed them, but they weren't greeting them just because of their background. Lin Lijuan, instead, was stunned to hear that Gu Qing and Gu Man were the bosses. How is it possible? Lin Lijuan couldn't believe her ears. However, since Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu, who were both from super-rich families, came here, Lin Lijuan greeted and flattered them at once. "Oh, Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu. It's such an honor to meet you again. You both are so gorgeous and don't seem to age at all. Isn't this Mrs. Gu? Why do you judge others in public?" Mrs. Hao asked sarcastically. Mrs. Hao wasn't arrogant at all, and she liked to stand up for her friends. In fact, Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu had been to Kame Beauty Salon twice after Gu Qing and Gu Man became its bosses. They shared many common interests and soon became good friends. Lin Lijuan sensed Mrs. Hao's anger and felt embarrassed, but explained with patience, "Mrs. Hao, please don't get me wrong. We're relatives. I knew that they have always lived a hard life and could barely afford their children's tuition fees. They have both quit their jobs and suddenly have money to do skincare. Thus I asked the question simply because I care about them. That's all." Facing Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu, Lin Lijuan didn't dare to raise her voice. Those two ladies were from super-rich families, but her husband was hardly a successful businessman. She wanted to please them, so she naturally had to leave a good impression on them. "They're your relatives?" Mrs. Liu was surprised. "Yes," Lin Lijuan replied. "Since you're relatives, why didn't you help them support their children to go to the school?" "Well, I understand that you don't have the duty to do so. Maybe because I value family very much, but I would have helped my family whenever they needed me." Mrs. Liu intentionally criticized Lin Lijuan for being so cold-blooded. Normally, they wouldn't criticize others in public, but what Lin Lijuan was doing was so unkind and vicious. She refused to help her relatives, and even hated to see them living a good life. Although Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu didn't know much about Gu Qing and Gu Man's family, they got to know some during small talks with Gu Qing and Gu Man. They were both aware that Gu Qing and Gu Man had worked in factories and had been on a tight budget. Gu Man had even been despised by her family because she had gotten pregnant before marriage, but Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu didn't care about that at all. They liked Gu Qing's and Gu Man's honesty and kindness, and they enjoyed chatting with each other. As noble ladies, they absolutely had many so-called friends who enjoyed either flattering one another or competing against each other, and they disliked that. They only socialized with them when it was necessary. Hearing what Mrs. Liu said, Lin Lijuan felt more embarrassed, and she also knew that Mrs. Liu did it on purpose. She hated Gu Qing and Gu Man so much because they had no intention to help her out. However, since Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu were here, Lin Lijuan didn't dare to blame Gu Qing and Gu Man. After that, Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu ignored Lin Lijuan, but said to Gu Qing and Gu Man, "Why don't we have the facial treatment first before we go have lunch together?" "Good idea," Gu Qing and Gu Man answered with one accord. Although they hadn't known each other for a very long time, they got along so well, as if they were old friends. News tirais at n/vel/b/i/n.co. Lin Lijuan was shocked that Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu invited Gu Qing and Gu Man to dine together. Why? How is it possible? Mrs. Gu, please help yourself, and sorry but we're busy right now, Gu Qing said to Lin Lijuan airily, then guided Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Lu into a private room along with Gu Man. Lin Lijuan was mad, but didn't dare to stop her. When they were gone, Lin Lijuan asked a receptionist at the reception, "Are Gu Qing and Gu Man your VIPs too?" "Not really, they're the first and second in command of Kame Beauty Salon," the receptionist replied politely. However, she disliked Lin Lijuan in her heart. She had witnessed what had just happened, and knew that Lin Lijuan was merely a snobbish and vain person. She now understood why their bosses didn't want their relatives to know that they were rich. What? Hearing that, Lin Lijuan rounded her eyes in shock. "Isn't Yu Na your boss?" "Boss Yu has already immigrated to another country, and now we only have Boss Gu here," the receptionist answered. "Impossible. They don't have enough money to acquire this store. It's worth at least a few million yuan." Lin Lijuan still refused to accept the truth. She couldn't believe that Gu Qing and Gu Man were able to afford it. The receptionist couldn't help but roll her eyes. Every rich man started from poverty, except for the rich second-generation heirs. However, even those rich second-generation heirs had to have the ability to maintain their family's wealth, or they would soon become poor people too. Gu Qing and Gu Man were both good bosses, and won the support of the staff. All the workers admired them, and naturally would protect them. "That's impossible. I have to ask them for the answer," Lin Lijuan said, running ahead. "Xiao Xiao, go and have a look. Never allow her to cause us any trouble," the receptionist said to a beautician assistant beside her at once. The beautician assistant immediately followed behind Lin Lijuan. Before Gu Man and the others got into the private room, Lin Lijuan stopped them in the passage. "Gu Qing, Gu Man, I need to talk to you right now." "Lin Lijuan, I don't think we have anything to talk about. If you want to have skincare, you can turn to the beauticians," Gu Qing refused directly. She knew what Lin Lijuan wanted to do, but she wouldn't listen to her now. If Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Lu had not been there, Lin Lijuan absolutely would have yelled at Gu Qing, but now Lin Lijuan had to swallow her anger. She turned around and left right away. She called Gu Qingxiang the minute she got outside. "What?" Gu Qingxiang was impatient at having to answer Lin Lijuan's call. "Honey, I just met Gu Qing and Gu Man in a beauty salon. You won't believe it, but they're the bosses of the beauty salon. How can they afford it? It's worth a few million yuan at least," Lin Lijuan said with anger. "What? They have that much money?" Hearing that, Gu Qingxiang was shocked too. He didn't believe it either. Exactly. That's the reason why they both quit and moved. They're rich now, and don't want to stay in contact with us, Lin Lijuan added. How did they become rich? Gu Qingxiang was confused. How would I know? I wanted to ask them, but Gu Qing wouldn't talk to me. Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Lu were also there helping them. I was afraid to annoy them, so I left. Thinking that Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Lu were so close to Gu Qing and Gu Man, Lin Lijuan was full of jealousy. What? Do you mean the Mrs. Hao whose family ranked 9th on the list of the richest, and the Mrs. Lu from Happy Home, the famous furniture and home accessories company? Gu Qingxiang was shocked once more. Yes, Lin Lijuan replied. Fine, I'll find out, Gu Qingxiang said, then hung up. He had mixed emotions now. He wanted to call Gu Qing with his mobile phone, but after second thought, he used the landline in his office, because Gu Qing knew his mobile phone number and she wouldn't answer his call. Gu Qing truly didn't know Gu Qingxiang's office number, so she answered his call. Hi. Gu Qingxiang didn't waste time greeting her, but asked directly, Gu Qing, I'm your eldest brother. I heard that you and Gu Man bought a beauty salon. Where did you get the money? He was purely questioning her. It sounded like he believed that Gu Qing and Gu Man should be poor and lack money forever. Hearing that, Gu Qing almost laughed because of her eldest brother's tone. She absolutely understood that Gu Qingxiang hated to see them living a better life than him, so she argued at once, "Why are you questioning me now? Is it illegal that we're rich? Don't forget your poor life from before you became rich." Gu Qingxiang was mad, but didn't know what to say. Gu Qing didn't avoid Gu Man, Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu, so they all heard everything clearly. Gu Man's face changed a little and seemed hurt. Even though she already saw through her family, she felt sad at being questioned like that. Mrs. Hao was irritated at once. She stood up grabbing the phone from Gu Qing and said, "Boss Gu, I'm Hao Zhonglong's wife, Gu Lan. I don't understand why you have to ask Gu Man and Gu Qing for the source of their money. Let me tell you this, I lent the money to them. And you don't have to right to question them." After that, Mrs. Hao hung up on Gu Qingxiang, looking at Gu Qing and Gu Man. "Sorry, I'm being a little rude. Please don't mind me." Gu Qing and Gu Man exchanged a glance, then snorted with laughter. Gu Qing said, "Of course not. I think you've done a great job." Is your money legal?" Mrs. Hao unconsciously asked, but she soon realized she shouldn't have said it. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it." It didn't matter if Mrs. Hao meant it or not, Gu Qing and Gu Man weren't mad at her. Gu Man explained, "Of course our money is legal. I just don't want to tell them. My daughter saved a man's life by accident. The man gave her an emerald the size of a quail's egg as a reward. My daughter then went to a jewelry store to identity it. Unexpectedly, it was the king's green, which was worth 10 million yuan. We didn't need jewelry, so my daughter sold it and used the money to start a business." Gu Man didn't hide the truth, because it wasn't shameful after all. And she was willing to tell Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu. Read the latest stories and novelbin.com. What? The king's green? It's the king of the jade. It must be priceless. Hearing that, Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu were shocked. Women loved jewelry. Some of them preferred gold and silver, some preferred diamond, while some preferred jade. Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu's preference was jade. Like the old saying went, jade nourished humans. And jade could accentuate their air of elegance. Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu didn't doubt Gu Man's explanation, because they believed that Gu Man wouldn't lie to them. Meanwhile, Gu Qingxiang was struck dumb for a long while after Mrs. Hao hung up on him. Mrs. Hao lent them money? He wasn't sure whether he should believe it, and was quite surprised. Although he didn't dare to annoy Mrs. Hao, he was aggravated by her. Gu Ning got off the plane and left the airport alone, instead of leaving with Guangyao and others. She turned on her phone, calling Gu Man. Hearing that Gu Qing and Gu Man were in the beauty salon, Gu Ning decided to meet them there. After the call with Gu Ning, Gu Man said to Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu, my daughter is coming here to meet us. We will probably dine together. Do you mind?" Mrs. Hao's and Mrs. Liu's eyes lit up at once. Mrs. Hao smiled. "Of course not. We also want to meet your daughter again." "Oh, can my son join us?" "He probably knows your daughter, because they go to the same school. Although my son isn't good at studying and is a little naughty sometimes, he's a nice boy," Mrs. Hao said. "Sure," Gu Man replied. Mrs. Hao then sent a message to her son. Hao Ran read the message from his mother, but he didn't want to go. However, her mother demanded that he come right away. Otherwise, she would punish him when she got home. To be honest, Hao Ran was afraid of his mother, because his mother could keep talking by his ears for a long time, which was quite bothersome, and Hao Ran couldn't stand it. In the end, he had to agree. Around 11:40 a.m., Gu Ning arrived at the beauty salon. Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Liu had also just finished their facial treatment, waiting in the lounge. "Ning Ning, come here." Gu Man saw Gu Ning first. Gu Ning walked over to Gu Man afterwards. The minute that Gu Ning walked inside, Mrs. Hao abruptly stood up in astonishment. "It's you!" Everybody looked at Mrs. Hao. Does she know Gu Ning? Seeing Mrs. Hao, Gu Ning was slightly surprised, but still greeted her politely. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Hao." "Don't call me Mrs. Hao. You can just call me Aunt Gu." Mrs. Hao had a good impression of Gu Ning in the first place, and now she liked her more after she found out that Gu Ning was Gu Man's daughter. "Nice to meet you, Aunt Gu," Gu Ning said again. "Gu Lan, do you know Gu Man's daughter?" Mrs. Liu asked with confusion. Gu Qing and Gu Man were also confused. "She is the girl who attended Master Qing's birthday party with Hao Ran and the other boys the other day. She also sent a gift of, wait a second, oh, the glass with deer heads. You told me that the girl had a good air at that time." Mrs. Hao explained with delight. "Oh, it was you?" Mrs. Liu was surprised. Gu Ning had impressed her that day. "Yes, it was me." "And nice to meet you too, madam," Gu Ning greeted Mrs. Liu. "Please don't call me madam. You can simply call me Aunt Bai," Mrs. Liu said. "Nice to meet you, Aunt Bai," Gu Ning said. Hearing that, Gu Qing and Gu Man figured out what was going on now. They knew that Gu Ning had attended a birthday party. "Gu Man told me that her daughter is a senior student in the No. 3 high school. I then called Hao Ran to meet you. Unexpectedly, you're friends already," Mrs. Hao said, like they were meant to be close. "Oh, Hao Ran is almost leaving his school now. I'm curious about his reaction when he sees you," Mrs. Liu said. Apparently, she had no intention to tell Hao Ran the coincidence beforehand. Gu Ning had the same idea, so she didn't tell Hao Ran either. The group of them went to the hotel after that. Mrs. Hao called Hao Ran and told him its location. Half an hour later, the dishes were gradually placed on the table. At the same time, Hao Ran arrived. The minute he walked into the private room, he noticed Gu Ning, because Gu Ning was more noticeable among those mature ladies. He rounded his eyes in great shock. "Boss, why are you here?" "Boss?" Everyone was surprised, glancing at Hao Ran and Gu Ning. Why is Hao Ran calling Gu Ning his boss? Gu Man also recognized Hao Ran when he came in. This boy had visited her in the hospital before, but she didn't remember his name. Now, Gu Man truly believed in fate. Well, it's nothing. I just had a bet with Gu Ning, and I lost, so I call her in that way." Hao Ran realized that he had said something wrong, so he gave them a perfunctory answer. In case they would ask further, Hao Ran immediately turned to Gu Man and asked, "Nice to meet you, Aunt Gu. Do you remember me?" Mrs. Hao clearly knew that her son fought a lot in his school, but she only knew that Hao Ran fought with boys. If Mrs. Hao found out that Hao Ran had fought with a girl and that it had been 3 versus 1, she would punish Hao Ran severely. Even if he hadn't won, it was shameful. Mrs. Hao hated people without manners. Check out LTSTVL on novl/bin.cm. "Of course. You visited me when I was in hospital," Gu Man said smiling. Hao Ran successfully removed the other's attention from his bet with Gu Ning. After greeting Mrs. Liu and Gu Qing, Hao Ran took a seat. Actually, Hao Ran was indeed a good boy. Except for fighting and being absent from classes, he was a well-educated boy with good manners. Teenagers were always disobedient after all. I have always wanted to buy a high-end set of jade jewelry, but there's only common jade in City F. The jewelry in Itsue Jade store isn't bad, but I don't like its style. And I'm too lazy to fly to a first-tier city, Mrs. Hao said resignedly. Hearing that, an idea dawned on Gu Ning. This was a good chance for her to advertise her jade jewelry brand. "Aunt Hao, there is a jade jewelry store in City G that opened the day before yesterday. It is called Jade Beauty Jewelry, which is a high-end brand. Its jade is all medium high level and above. A big king's green was open for reservation at its opening ceremony, and it was fully reserved within minutes. The store made at least 100 million yuan that day. Although the king's green is sold out, there are many other rare types of jade, like old pit glass, double happiness, purple violet, the water type, the hibiscus type and so forth. It also provides a customization service. In addition, all the consumers can have a 10% discount during the first 3 days after its opening ceremony," Gu Ning said. It was quite persuasive. "Really?" Mrs. Hao's and Mrs. Lu's eyes lit up with excitement. "Yes. I was been there last weekend. You can also search for it on the internet. There's a lot of news about it." Many important figures in City G attended its opening ceremony, Gu Ning replied. Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Lu immediately used their phones to search jade beauty jewelry, reading through the news. When they saw the advertisement post, both Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Lu were thrilled. The king's green seemed so attractive. It was a pity that they missed the chance to see it in person. And there were many photos of other jade jewelry. The jewelry made of high-level jade was indeed different from cheaper ones. They could even feel its nobility through the screen of their phones. Gu Qing and Gu Man were curious too, but they knew less about jade, so they searched it for fun. The design actually looks simple, but the high-level jade is indeed special, Mrs. Hao said. Exactly. And there are so many types of jade which are hard to find. The boss of the jade beauty jewelry must be wealthy and has a rich source of jade, Mrs. Lu added. They loved jade, and naturally knew the source of jade. Jade was from stone gambling. Stone gambling was much harder than normal forms of gambling. 99% of the time people could fail. Only 1% could win. Professional skills and knowledge were reliable, but they only slightly raised the possibility to win. Why don't we go to City G together? Mrs. Hao proposed. Good idea. I'll book the plane tickets right now, and we're leaving this afternoon. Mrs. Lu was also excited. Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Lu were so efficient, and Gu Ning was happy that she had successfully promoted her brand. City G wasn't far away from City F and it only took an hour to fly there. Hao Ran, who was already used to his mother's behavior, stayed silent. After the meal, since Mrs. Hao and Mrs. Lu were leaving for City G, they dispersed. Hao Ran asked Gu Ning whether she wanted to go back to school with him. Gu Ning declined because she had already asked for a leave and would go to school tomorrow. The minute that Lin Li Juan got home, she told her mother-in-law about what had happened today. The old lady was shocked that Gu Qing and Gu Man were suddenly rich and had even acquired a beauty salon. How can they do that? They're rich now, and disappear right away. They should respect and think about me, the old lady said, as if she was the one who had always been treated unfairly. She even took it for granted that Gu Qing's and Gu Man's money belonged to her. The old lady didn't care about her daughter's life, but only wanted them to pay her back because she had brought them up. All in all, the old lady hated Gu Qing and Gu Man and didn't want them to live a better life than her. Lin Li Juan had an evil idea all of a sudden. Mom, Gu Man is still unmarried according to the law, and she is still your daughter. Her money should be yours too. Although Gu Man's money was barely comparable to Gu Qingxiang's wealth, Lin Lijuan merely wanted to prevent Gu Qing and Gu Man from living a good life. Especially Gu Man, Lin Lijuan hated her to death because of what Gu Ning had done to Gu Xiaoxiao. The old lady immediately called Gu Man, but Gu Man wouldn't answer. Undoubtedly, the old lady was calling her for nothing good. Gu Man wouldn't answer her call, and the old lady was furious. She called Gu Qing, but it was still the same. The old lady was in a rage now. They both won't answer my call. They totally forget that I am their mother. Where is the beauty salon? I'll go and find them in person. Lin Lijuan didn't stop her, and told her mother-in-law the address. The old lady left the house right away. Gu Ning was free today, so she went back to the beauty salon along with Gu Qing and Gu Man. In fact, Gu Ning was worried that her grandmother would cause them trouble again, because the old lady had just called Gu Qing and Gu Man. If the old lady came to them right now, Gu Ning was afraid that Gu Qing and Gu Man wouldn't be able to handle the situation. Gu Ning was right. Only half an hour after they were back in the beauty salon, the old lady arrived. And the minute she walked in, the old lady shouted, "Gu Qing, Gu Man, come out now." Her shout attracted a lot of attention from people around her. Everyone instantly knew that she must be a troublemaker. "May I ask your name? Why do you want to meet our bosses?" The receptionist immediately walked over to comfort her, in case the old lady ran amok. However, the old lady was shameless and didn't care about her face at all. She stood at the door swearing loudly, "Gu Qing, Gu Man, you're so unfilial. You're rich now, and you forget about your mother. You're sh*ts. Within seconds, many people gathered around, and those who didn't know the truth all blamed the so-called unfilial daughters. However, the staff in the beauty salon all believed that Gu Qing and Gu Man wouldn't do such a thing. Gu Ning, Gu Qing and Gu Man were sitting in a nearby office room. They heard it clearly, walking out at once. Seeing her grandmother, Gu Ning was extremely displeased. Gu Qing and Gu Man were also unhappy. Their mother meant nothing to them now. Up-to-date OVLS on OVL.bin.cm. Before they came out, Gu Ning told Gu Qing as well as Gu Man to stay quiet and let her solve this problem. "What did you just say?" Gu Ning said coldly. She didn't have any respect towards her grandmother because her grandmother didn't deserve it at all. "Isn't it true? You became rich and suddenly disappeared. You quit your job, moved to another place, and won't even answer my calls. If my eldest son's wife hadn't encountered you here, I would probably still have no idea that you're rich enough to run a salon now," the old lady said angrily. "Really? They disappeared once they became rich. They abandoned their mother." Some criticized Gu Qing and Gu Man. "Shut your mouth." Gu Ning snapped. Her cold glance made the crowd fall silent. Everyone was frightened by her coldness. Gu Ning said icily, "Do you know the real reason behind it? If you don't, then shut up. Don't think you stand by the side of fairness after you only hear her accusation. If you were us, I don't believe that you can still blame us." Everyone immediately knew that the thing wasn't as simple as the old lady said. Some felt embarrassed and no one said another word. "I think you must still remember why we moved out. It was you who forced us to leave. Your lovely granddaughter scared my mother with a photo of me and my schoolmates playing together. My mother thought I was beaten by them and fell down the stairs. My mother had to stay in the hospital for a week. Did you ever come and visit her? And you have even sworn at my mother and me in public. Why should we still have to answer your calls?" Gu Ning sneered. In her eyes, the old lady was just a shameless loser. What? The old lady is the shameless one? Hearing that, everyone looked at the old lady in a different way. If it was true, only idiots would answer her calls. The old lady was mad, but didn't know how to retort. No matter what your scheme is, this saloon has nothing to do with you. It belongs to me, and I have no connection with you. Thus you have no right to interfere in my business, Gu Ning said. You're my granddaughter. How come you have no connection with me? The old lady argued. She totally forgot that she had refused to admit that Gu Ning was her granddaughter before. Facing money, the old lady was more than willing to admit that Gu Ning was her granddaughter. Interesting. Gu Ning laughed out loud. It was so ironic. For the past 18 years, you refused to admit that I'm your granddaughter. In your eyes, I'm merely AB*ST** road. And now, you want me to call you my grandmother just because I'm rich? In your dreams. Gu Ning didn't care to reveal her terrible history in public, because she didn't want the old lady to ruin her mother and aunt's reputations. It would be terrible if the old lady succeeded this time. Now, the crowd started to criticize the old lady. Your mother did. However, before the old lady could finish, Gu Ning interrupted her saying coldly, I told you not to humiliate my mother and me again. Otherwise, you'd pay for it. Don't ever try to restrict me with moral standards. It's useless. Follow the latest novels n/velbin.com. Hearing that, the old lady lowered her voice, but she was reluctant to give up. Your mother is my daughter, and you're obliged to support me when I'm old. You're rich now, and you have to let me share your money. Well, my eldest uncle has a company with dozens of million yuan in assets. If his wealth isn't enough to provide you a good life, I won't stop my mother and aunt from supporting you, Gu Ning replied. The old lady was so greedy. What? Her eldest son had a company with dozens of million yuan in assets, and she now even asked her daughters for money? She simply didn't want her daughters to live a good life. Everyone disliked and despised the old lady now. None of them felt sorry for her anymore. Gu Ning added then, each of them can only give you 1,000 yuan every month. Although Gu Ning wouldn't stop Gu Qing and Gu Man from supporting her grandmother, she would limit the amount of allowance. Gu Ning only did it for Gu Qing and Gu Man's good. She didn't want others to blame her mother and aunt for not supporting their mother. If Gu Ning had such a mother, she wouldn't give her a cent at all. What? 1,000 yuan? I'm not a beggar. Gu Man is still unmarried, and she's still my daughter. I of course should be in charge of her money. The old lady was mad. She wanted far more than 1,000 yuan. Everyone was stunned by the old lady's shamelessness. Even though Gu Man was still unmarried, she had a daughter and had already moved out. The old lady's son was rich, but she still wanted to exploit her daughters. This time, Gu Ning couldn't help laughing. You should be in charge of my mother's money? You're crazy. My mother's money only belongs to her, she won't give you an allowance now either. If you still know what shame is, you better go away right now. Otherwise, I'll call the police. The old lady didn't expect that Gu Ning would dare to force her to go away. Exactly. She's so shameless. She has kicked her daughters out, and now wants to take control of her daughter's money? Who does she think she is? It's so awful to have such a mother. If I were her daughter, I would go far away from her, and never come back. Everyone criticized the old lady. The old lady couldn't stand it, so she suddenly went amok. Gu Ning, you're merely AB*ST**RD without a father. It was me who brought you up, but you have no respect towards me. And you even made Xiao Xiao transfer to another school. You'll go to hell. What? Ning Ning made Xiao Xiao transfer to another school? Gu Qing and Gu Man were both astonished. However, they believed that Gu Ning wouldn't do that for no reason. Gu Xiaoxiao must have done something terrible to Gu Ning, and made Gu Ning do something to force her to transfer to another school. The rest of the people didn't believe the old lady's words either. Gu Ning was furious, and she almost lost control of her urge to slap the old lady. Her utterly cold look made the old lady tremble in shock. You're indeed shameless. However, since you brought it up, I'm glad to tell you the truth. Although I don't believe that you had no idea why Gu Xiaoxiao transferred to another school, I'll tell you once more. She is my biological cousin, but humiliated my mother in public. I slapped her for that, and she turned to the Qing gang for help. She hired some hoodlums to rape me. If I hadn't beaten down those hoodlums, I would be ruined already. I didn't call the police and throw her into prison, but you aren't grateful at all. You even blame me for that. It was our school's decision to expel her, because no school would allow a student to do such a vicious thing, and no school wanted a student who has committed such a crime. Gu Qing and Gu Man were stunned by Gu Ning's words. The crowd also took a long cold breath in. The girl called Gu Xiaoxiao is so malicious that she even hired hoodlums to rape her cousin. Gu Man ran to Gu Ning, clasping her in her arms and crying in pain. Ning Ning, my poor child. I had no idea that you suffered so much. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Gu Man couldn't imagine the result if Gu Ning hadn't beaten those hoodlums down. Mom, I'm fine. Don't worry, Gu Ning immediately comforted her mother. If the old lady hadn't been so unreasonable, Gu Ning wouldn't have said it in public. She was unwilling to upset her mother and aunt, and also didn't want to expose her terrible experience in front of strangers. Gu Qing couldn't help weeping too. She snapped at the old lady, "How could you be so cruel? Go away right now. I don't have a mother like you." At that time, nobody thought that Gu Qing's behavior was inappropriate, because the old lady deserved it. Everyone had sympathy for Gu Man, Gu Qing and Gu Ning now. Seeing that the old lady didn't move at all, Gu Qing ordered a manager beside her, "Manager Chen, please take this old lady out and let the security guards handle it. If she dares to cause any trouble again, call the police." "Sure." A woman who was around 30 years old, followed by several men, walked out without delay. They violently pulled the old lady towards the outside. "Gu Qing, how dare you do this to me? I am your mother." The old lady had never been humiliated like that before. She trembled in anger and shock, but failed to resist. The minute that Manager Chen and the other men grabbed the old lady, pulling her out, 2 security guards who had been informed arrived. Manager Chen then handed the old lady to the security guards and briefly told them what had just happened. After that, 2 security guards forced the old lady to leave without hesitation. The old lady was driven away, and the crowd dispersed afterwards. Those customers who were in the middle of skincare didn't leave just because of the drama, but comforted Gu Qing and Gu Man before they continued. Apparently, Gu Qing and Gu Man were both admired by their staff and the customers. The old lady kept swearing on her way out of the shopping mall. The 2 security guards didn't let her go until they were outside, but they didn't leave right away. Instead, they fixed their eyes on the old lady in case she tried slide in and cause any trouble again. Although the old lady was mad, she could do nothing under the surveillance of security guards. She called Gu Qingxiang, telling him what had just happened. The old lady kept blaming Gu Qing, Gu Man and Gu Ning, and didn't think that it was her fault at all. Gu Qingxiang was shocked by his mother's stupid behavior and demanded that she go back home right away. What his mother had done was so shameful, and Gu Qing as well as Gu Man had Mrs. House support now. The Gu family was barely comparable to the Hao family. The old lady knew nothing about it, but she listened to Gu Qingxiang and went back home. She decided to wait for another chance. Check new CHDers at novilbin.com. When the old lady got back home, Lin Lijuan immediately understood that she had failed. Lin Lijuan was so disappointed. However, she still asked, "Mom, how was it?" She wanted to know how Gu Qing and Gu Man managed to handle the old lady. Gu Ning the B***ST**RD. She said that Gu Man's money has nothing to do with me. She would even only allow Gu Qing and Gu Man to give me 1,000 yuan every month. "I'm not a beggar," the old lady said in anger. Although she already lived a good life in Gu Qingxiang's place, and even had a savings of around 100,000 yuan, she simply wanted to seize Gu Man's and Gu Qing's money. Gu Ning? Lin Lijuan was full of anger when she heard Gu Ning's name. If it hadn't been for Gu Ning, Gu Xiaoxiao wouldn't have had to transfer to another school. The national college entrance exam was just around the corner, and the school transfer could affect Gu Xiaoxiao's studying. It was meaningless and useless to talk about reason with a selfish person, because she was so self-centered and didn't care about others at all. It was her fault, but she would still blame others for that. The old lady couldn't calm down. She went back to her room, calling Gu Qingyang, and told him everything. What? Gu Qing and Gu Man are rich now? They acquired a beauty salon? Where did they get their money from? Gu Qingyang was more than shocked and felt jealous when he heard the news. Gu Qing and Gu Man had always been the poorest in the Gu family, but now they had a salon with millions of yuan in assets, while Gu Qingyang himself only had 100,000 yuan. I have no idea where their money came from, but they're suddenly rich now. That's the reason why they quit their jobs, moved into another place, and even refused to answer our calls. They totally forgot us, the old lady complained. Gu Qingyang absolutely knew what his mother liked. She must have said something terrible and was driven away by Gu Qing and Gu Man. However, he was also mad at Gu Qing and Gu Man because they had abandoned him too once they became rich. He felt like he lost the respect from his two sisters. Thus he immediately called Gu Qing after he hung up the call with his mother. Gu Qing understood why Gu Qingyang called her. She didn't want to answer it in the beginning, but she was also clear that if she didn't answer it, he would keep calling her forever. She couldn't turn her phone off, because she was running a business now. In the end, Gu Qing answered it. Facing Gu Qingyang's question, Gu Qing argued back using what Gu Ning had said to the old lady. She even asked Gu Qingyang whether he would still be quiet if the old lady and Gu Qingxiang's family humiliated them like usual. The old lady aimed at Gu Man and Gu Ning, but she also hated and always swore at Gu Qing too. Gu Qing, therefore, had no good feelings towards her mother, but had a close relationship with Gu Man naturally. Gu Qing stood with Gu Man and Gu Ning. Gu Qingyang didn't know what to say, because he was so used to discriminating against Gu Qing and Gu Man. Especially when Gu Qing had married Jiang Su, who was poor, and Gu Man had gotten pregnant before being married, Gu Qingyang despised them more. However, he had only laughed at Gu Man and Gu Qing, and hadn't hurled abuse at them. It was his mother who had always treated them so unfairly. Gu Ning was right by Gu Qing's side. She told Gu Qing to give the phone to her. Gu Ning then said, "Uncle, this Gu Ning. I call you my uncle just because there isn't a considerable grudge between us. And let me tell you this, except for my aunt's family, I hate all the rest in the Gu family. We haven't cut your family off yet, but it doesn't mean that we won't. You probably think that I'm being too proud, but that's the truth. You better face it. If you still take my mother and my aunt as your sisters, please stop interfering in our personal affairs. If you want to scheme against us like Gu Qingxiang's family, I'll pay you back. I'm not just saying that." Gu Xiaoxiao is a great example. Gu Ning said it calmly, but Gu Qinyang was anxious. What did you do to Xiaoxiao? Gu Qinyang asked. F0 low new hapters at nov/e/l/bin/.com. Gu Xiaoxiao hired some hoodlums to rape me, but I know kung fu and I beat them down onto the ground. She was then expelled by our school. I spread the news across City F, and no school was willing to accept her. She had to leave City F. I didn't call the police and throw her into prison, but her family still blamed me. I don't care about them now. If anyone dares to hurt me, I'll definitely pay him or her back. Gu Ning didn't mind telling Gu Qinyang the details, because she planned to remind him to behave himself. Gu Ning had no intention to cut Gu Qinyang's family off, for now. Gu Qinyang's family had invited Gu Qing and Gu Man to dine together when they had been in City F last time, which meant that Gu Qinyang still treated Gu Qing and Gu Man as his family, although he disliked his sisters. Gu Ning didn't care about the Gu family, but they were Gu Qing and Gu Man's family after all. Although Gu Qing and Gu Man were already disappointed in them, they still longed for care and love from their family deep down in their hearts. As long as Gu Qinyang behaved himself, Gu Ning wouldn't cut him off. However, if he schemed against her like Gu Qingxiang's family, Gu Ning wouldn't be kind to him either. Hearing that, Gu Qinyang couldn't help taking a long cold breath in. Gu Qingxiang had only told him that Gu Xiaoxiao had annoyed a student from a powerful family, so Gu Xiaoxiao had transferred to another city for her own safety. If what Gu Ning told him was true, Gu Xiaoxiao was really evil, but Gu Ning wasn't simple either if she had been able to spread the news across the city. Although Gu Qinyang still doubted Gu Ning's ability, he couldn't ignore the possibility. Thus he wasn't willing to be involved in this mess for now. Gu Qinyang was selfish and felt jealous of Gu Qing and Gu Man because they suddenly became rich. However, he also knew that it had nothing to do with him. He indeed had no right to be involved. Hao Ran went back to his school and told his friends what his mother had done. His mother called him to join a meal and make friends with her friend's daughter. Unexpectedly, the daughter of his mother's friend was exactly his boss. His friends all joked that Hao Ran and Gu Ning were meant to be good friends. In the afternoon, Gu Ning had an appointment with Qian to dine together. Qian was off duty after 5:30 p.m., and the center hospital wasn't far away from downtown. It only took several minutes to get there by car. Gu Ning arrived at the restaurant before 5:30 p.m., and Qian arrived a little later at 5:40 p.m. Ning Ning. Qian was excited to see Gu Ning. Hi! Gu Ning immediately stood up to welcome her. You finally called me out. I've been waiting for your call. The National College entrance exam is just around the corner, and I was afraid to affect your studying, so I don't dare to call you, Qian slightly complained. Gu Ning felt a little embarrassed. She wasn't busy studying at all. Instead, she was busy flying to City G to deal with business. I have been very busy these days, but I called you as soon as I was free, Gu Ning explained. All right, I forgive you, Qian said. She wasn't really mad at Gu Ning, because she understood that Gu Ning as a senior student had to be occupied by studying and school assignments. What do you want to have? Gu Ning handed the menu to Qian. Qian took it and read for a while. I think I want steak, a fillet, done medium well, and black pepper sauce. I'll have the same, Gu Ning said. Oh, I brought you a gift, Gu Ning said, taking a small box out of her backpack. A gift for me? Qian was surprised, but she didn't take the box right away. What is it? She understood that Gu Ning was sending her a gift because she had taken care of Gu Man, but it was nothing compared to what Gu Ning had done for her. If it was only an ordinary gift, she would take it, but if it was too expensive, she wouldn't accept it. Gu Ning knew what was in Qian's mind, so she told a white lie, just a jade pendant. It's not expensive at all. I went to City G the other day and bought it because it's beautiful. Since Gu Ning said so, and Qian didn't reject. Thanks. The minute she saw the jade pendant in the shape of a leaf, and Qian liked it a lot. Wow. It's so pretty. She put it on afterwards, and even took a photo with it. And Qian knew less about jade, so she had no idea about its type, nor level. After the meal, they went to shop together. Gu Ning wasn't busy today, so she was glad to be in Qian's company. Just as Gu Ning and Qian entered the store, 3 young women around 26 years old came inside too. However, when they noticed Qian, they all changed their expressions. One of them said acidly, "Oh, isn't this Doctor In? What a coincidence!" Seeing the 3 women, Qian was displeased too. There was impatience and hatred in her eyes. Qian ignored them at once. Qian, where are your manners? How can you be so impolite and ignore us? The woman asked sarcastically. This time, Qian couldn't stay quiet anymore. She looked to the woman, saying coldly, "Qin Mingqi, I don't think you're qualified to judge my manners. Can't you treat me as a common stranger?" "Qian, I want to do so, but I can't because you robbed me of my man." Qin Mingqi clenched her teeth in anger. Hearing that, Gu Ning frowned a little. Although she didn't believe that Qian would do so, she couldn't jump to conclusions before she knew the details. "Qin Mingqi, you're insane. I never robbed you of your man. Lu Zhengyu isn't your man. You can't get him because you don't deserve him. He dislikes you, and you can't blame me for that." Qian snapped. Now, Gu Ning understood what was going on to some extent. "If it hadn't been for you, he wouldn't have rejected me. You know that he likes you, but you don't like him, then why do you have to be so close to him and give him hope?" Qin Mingqi criticized. "Qin Mingqi, don't you think that you're being ridiculous? It has nothing to do with you if I stay close to him. He isn't your boyfriend, and you have no right to interfere in his personal affairs." Although it wasn't the first time that Qin Mingqi had said that to her, Qian still thought that it was ridiculous whenever she heard it. "Nevertheless, he said that he only likes you." Qin Mingqi was jealous. "So what? It has nothing to do with you," Qian replied. Qin Mingqi didn't know how to retort. Who Lu Zhengyu liked indeed had nothing to do with her, but because Lu Zhengyu only liked Qian, she had no chance. She could only blame and hate Qian. At that time, a saleswoman walked over and reminded them. "Please do not argue in our store. There are other consumers here." "Thanks. As long as this miss shuts her mouth, we'll be fine." Qian said. It was Qin Mingqi's fault, not hers. As long as Qin Mingqi didn't pick on her, she wouldn't argue with her in public. After that, Qian ignored Qin Mingqi, turning around to shop for clothing. Although Qian's mood was affected, she was still interested in the fashionable clothes in front of her eyes. Qian pointed a dress hanging on the wall. "Please let me try this one." Qin Mingqi was furious, but it wasn't the right time to continue arguing. She had already lost her face, so she left right away. After Qin Mingqi was gone, Qian said to Gu Ning, "I met Lu Zhengyu when I was only 10. Our families have known each other for generations. Lu Zhengyu and I aren't family, but we are more than family. There is only a girl in my family, so he always takes care of me like he's my older brother. Thus I'm used to having him by my side as my older brother. I can't face his affection towards me for now, but I'm not running away from it either. He also knows that he's only an older brother in my eyes, but he's unwilling to give up. In that case, We have an agreement. If I can't meet a man that I love before I turn 30, we'll get married. I know it's unfair to him, but the rules in love indeed aren't fair. The one who falls in love first loses. And Qian told Gu Ning everything, because she needed to talk to someone right now. Gu Ning agreed with Qian on what she said. The rules in love indeed aren't fair. The one who fell in love first lost. At least, Qian and Lu Jiangyu truly cared about each other, even though they treated each other more like family. Nevertheless, even romance and love could become familial affection after marriage. The fact that Qian made the agreement with Lu Jiangyu proved the possibility that she and Lu Jiangyu might end up being family. Ning, come on and have a look. If there is anything you want, let me buy it for you, Qian said. The clothes in the store was a medium-level brand and wasn't very expensive, so Gu Ning didn't hesitate. She picked a hat that she liked. I think that this hat isn't bad. Qian bought a sweater, a coat, and a skirt. Later, Qian and Gu Ning separated after shopping. Gu Ning didn't go back home immediately, but went to Yuntai Mountain. She had delayed the scavenger hunt for so long, and she decided to have a look since she was free now. Nobody was climbing the mountain in the night, so it was pretty quiet on Yuntai Mountain. There were no precious objects either, thus nobody was on duty at night. There were cameras at the entrance, but it was completely dark around. Gu Ning easily got inside by climbing over the wall. Although it was night, Gu Ning had jade eyes to help her see clearly. She ran to the top within an hour and 20 minutes, then she swiftly took out rope from the telepathic eye space and fastened it somewhere before sailing down. She stopped when she found the cave and used her jade eyes to check the inside of it in case there was anything dangerous. No danger was spotted. Afterwards, Gu Ning used the tools to lever the out layer of the cliff. There was nobody around, so she wasn't afraid to make noise. There were cracks in the cliff, and they got wider after a short while. Gu Ning only needed a gap that was wide enough to let her in. About an hour later, the crack became a wide gap. Gu Ning successfully got inside, heading straight to the source of the power. She walked ahead for 20 meters and arrived at a cave that 10 square meters big. Its decoration was very simple. There was only a pile of sticks and a pot with several broken bowls on one side. On the other side, there was a straw mat with a few pieces of clothing that had already become rags, and a large parcel the size of a pillow. The power came from the parcel, which meant that the ancient objects had to be in it. Gu Ning didn't open the parcel right away. Instead, she used her jade eyes to see what was inside, in case there were any snakes or rats. Gu Ning was bold, but she was still scared of snakes and rats. Luckily, there was only jewelry, bundles of banknotes and china. Thus Gu Ning went forward to open it. She didn't have time to study these objects in the cave, so she put them into her telepathic eye space and planned to study them when she got home. After that, Gu Ning left the same way she came. When she finally got home, it was almost 12 p.m. Gu Man knew that Gu Ning went to meet Qian today, so she thought that the two had been together all day and didn't ask further. Gu Ning went straight to her room, taking out the ancient objects one by one. They all belonged to a corrupt official in the Qing dynasty, but some of them could be from other dynasties before Qing. Gu Ning put the jewelry aside at first, and checked a bronze mirror first. She had read an introduction about it from the books of antiques. Get latest CHPTers on nvelbj/n.c/m. The bronze mirror originated from the Shang and Zhou dynasties, but the use of bronze mirrors in the Shang dynasty wasn't universal. It was a rare item and only owned by very high-ranking people. Later, it became popular in the Warring States period, and was more delicate during Han and Tang dynasty. Bronze mirror varied in different periods. In the Yinxiang period, it was small, and the back of the mirror was geometrically decorated. In the Zhou period, it was generally plain, but its button form was variable. And there were a few bronze mirrors in the spring and autumn period. Most of them had plain backs, and a few were decorated with tigers, deer and birds. During the Warring States period, bronze mirrors were produced in large numbers. During this period, the bronze mirror was more delicate and light, and its buttons were small and thin. It was generally decorated with fine patterns. The most common ones were mountain patterns, dragon and phoenix patterns, mosaic patterns, continuous arc patterns, diamond patterns, and so forth. The bronze mirrors in the Han Dynasty were generally thick and heavy, and there were often inscriptions of auspicious words on the mirror. The mirror buttons were mostly hemispherical, and the persimmon-shaped button holder was very popular. At that time, there was also a kind of light transmission mirror called light of seeing the sun. When the mirror surface was exposed to sunlight, the wall reflected the pattern corresponding to the mirror back. From the middle of the Han Dynasty to the Wei and Jin Dynasty, there were embossed portraits and oracle mirrors. The Tang Dynasty was the peak period of the development of bronze mirrors in this country. It wasn't only delicate, but also broke the traditional mode of the traditional bronze mirror as a circular button. There were many forms such as square, rhomboid, sunflower and handheld mirrors. Its patterns also became variable and colorful, like butterflies, grapes, birds and beasts, and character stories. During this period, gold-silver flat mirrors also emerged. In the Song Dynasty, the technique of casting mirrors gradually began to decline. The mirrors in the Song Dynasty were mainly composed of tangled flowers and peony. Huzhou was the most famous center for casting mirrors. Their mirror backs were often marked with a mirror workshop. The bronze mirror in Gu Ning's hands was exquisite and light. Its buttons were small, and there were diamond patterns on it. It had to belong to the Warring States period. As for its price, Gu Ning couldn't estimate it, but it should be worth a few million yuan. The next ancient object was a white, thin porcelain jar with a height of 10.3 centimeters, a diameter of 5.2 centimeters and a bottom diameter of 6.6 centimeters. The porcelain jar was as thin as a piece of paper. It was light and shiny with exquisite painting, yellow glaze, and a grape pattern. Its bottom noted Yongle period. This thin, white porcelain jar had to come from the Yongle period, and was a rarity. A thin, white porcelain bowl was worth tens of millions of yuan normally, so the value of this porcelain jar should be even higher. Gu Ning thought that it might be worth at least 7 or 8 million. She was thrilled now. Then she took out many plates, including a pastel plate, blue and white plates, and so on. These were all worth millions of yuan. After that, there were pieces of calligraphy too. One was from the famous painter, calligrapher and poet Tang Yin in the Ming Dynasty, and was called Hibiscus by Water. It was also worth several million yuan. The other one was Luo Xinfu from the famous calligrapher, painter and poet Zhao Mingfu, who was born between the end of the Song Dynasty and the beginning of the Yuan Dynasty. It was worth from at least a few million yuan to more than tens of millions of yuan. In the market, the price would be lower. However, when it came to the auction, its price would be much higher. Gu Ning planned to sell it on auction. Everything else was gold and silver ingots, gold bracelets, gold leaves, and so on. Lu Jiang was really a corrupt official, and he had gotten so many highly valuable items. Gu Ning actually wanted to thank him. There was also a square box of rosewood with a height of about 10 centimeters. Gu Ning opened the box and a bright light came out. Gu Ning was scared, and instinctively threw the box away. It fell on the bed. At the same time, Gu Ning sensed a strong power. Although the power was so strong that Gu Ning couldn't wait to absorb it, she curbed her desire and decided to wait until she saw it clearly. The minute that Gu Ning saw what was inside, she rounded her eyes in shock. It was a night-luminescent pearl the size of 2 eggs. It was worth at least over 10 million yuan. Other than its value, its power was the strongest one that Gu Ning had ever encountered. The night-luminescent pearl was a rare jewel and had many nicknames. It could absorb the essence and power from the moon and sun on its own. That was to say, as long as Gu Ning brought this night-luminescent pearl with her, she could collect the power automatically. This night-luminescent pearl was the most precious object that Gu Ning had found from the scavenger hunt. Therefore, she wouldn't sell this night-luminescent pearl, but kept it for her own use. When Gu Ning absorbed the power of the night-luminescent pearl into the telepathic eye space, the space changed and was doubled again. It was 4 square meters big now, and its transparency was also improved. After that, Gu Ning put everything into her jade eyes before she went to bed. She lacked money now, but it would still not be enough even if she sold all of the ancient objects. Thus Gu Ning decided to take it slow, and wait for auctions. Get the latest chapters on n/velbin.com. Fortunately, there was nothing bad that happened in the following days. Gu Qingxiang didn't cause Gu Qing and Gu Man more trouble. Qin Ziyao went to attend classes, but she was always being alienated by others in her school. Her classmates would continuously criticize her bad behavior and she lived in anxiety all day. She had seen Gu Ning several times, but didn't dare to meet her sight. However, once Gu Ning passed by, she would glare at her, like she was going to kill her. Qin Ziyao hated Gu Ning to death, but didn't know what to do, so she could only swallow her anger. In City G, Hongyun Real Estate did nothing after Xinhua Real Estate had acquired Jingyang Street. It might have seemed like that, but they were already scheming secretly. Because Xinhua Real Estate hadn't started building buildings on Jingyang Street yet, Fang Changxing planned to do something at Xinhua Real Estate sites in City F. Thus, it was only the peace before the great storm. Jade Beauty Jewelry worked well too. Although its profits declined after the first 3 days, its sales were still much better than normal jewelry stores. The only thing that upset Gu Ning was that Leng Xiaoting had disappeared for many days, and she had still not heard anything from him. She was concerned, but the man was fulfilling his tasks, so she wasn't willing to bother him. However, it wasn't peaceful in the Li family. Li Jinjin had locked herself in the room for 2 days. She didn't eat, nor drink, which terrified her family. She wouldn't open the door, so Li Zhenyu had to break it. He found Li Jinjin almost passed out, and immediately sent her to the hospital. Her family asked Li Jinjin why she did that, but Li Jinjin wouldn't say a word. Her family even though that she did it because of Qin Yifan, but it didn't make sense, because Qin Yifan had rejected Li Jinjin many times, and Li Jinjin had never behaved like that before. Then why? Her family failed to figure out the reason. Li Zhenyu suddenly thought of Su Jing, who was Li Jinjin's best friend, so he called Su Jing without delay. Knowing what had happened to Li Jinjin, Su Jing wasn't surprised at all, because she was also in a terrible condition right now, but to prevent her family from finding out, Su Jing tried her best to eat in front of them. Thus her physical condition wasn't as bad as Li Jinjin's. She hated Lin Wensong and Yuan Sun so much that she was eager to kill them, but she also knew that it wasn't practical. Facing Li Zhenyu's questions, Su Jing replied that she wasn't clear, but that she was going to visit Li Jinjin. Su Jing carefully put on makeup to cover her wan look before she left her home. When she arrived at the hospital there was only Li Zhenyu by Li Jinjin's side. Su Jing said that she wanted to talk with Li Jinjin alone, so Li Zhenyu walked out. "Jinjin, I'm so sorry. If I hadn't called you out to drink, it wouldn't have happened," Su Jing apologized to Li Jinjin sincerely. Li Jinjin naturally hated Su Jing because just as she had said, if she hadn't called her out to drink, none of it would have happened. Nevertheless, she had agreed to drink with them on her own, and Su Jing was a victim too. Li Jinjin stayed quiet, so Su Jing didn't know what to say next. Find new stories on NOV/E After a long while, Li Jinjin opened her mouth. Su Jing, do you want to get revenge? Yes, but how? Su Jing sounded upset. They had videos and photos in their hands. As long as they're dead, no one will know about it, Li Jinjin said. There was a sense of murder in her empty eyes. Hearing that, Su Jing trembled. How can they be dead? She didn't want to risk her life. Li Jinjin of course understood what was in Su Jing's mind, and she had the same thought too. Relax, we'll be fine. During lunch on Thursday, Gu Ning's phone rang suddenly. Seeing the caller, Gu Ning's face immediately lit up. Hi, she said in a soft tone. Gu Ning's unusual reaction raised the others' curiosity. It seemed like their boss was in love. Have you eaten? Ling Xiaoting asked gently. Yeah, I'm eating right now. How about you? Gu Ning asked. Not yet, but soon, Ling Xiaoting said. Have you finished your task? Gu Ning asked. Yes, but I'm still occupied by other work, so I can't come to you right now, Ling Xiaoting answered. It's fine. Work first, and we can meet when you're free. Gu Ning understood it. After a while, they hung up. Then Gu Ning realized that Chu Pei Han and the others were studying her face, searching for gossip. Gu Ning panicked a little. Boss, are you in love? Chu Pei Han approached Gu Ning. The rest were also staring at her with burning curiosity. Yes, Gu Ning said with alacrity. Really? Wow. They were all surprised and surrounded Gu Ning at once. Boss, what does he look like? What does he do? Do you have a photo of him? He's handsome, a military officer, and no, I don't have a photo, Gu Ning replied. They were excited to hear that their boss's boyfriend was handsome. And they admired him because he was a military officer. However, they were disappointed that there was no photo of him. I'll introduce him to you in the future. Come on, we'll continue practicing after lunch. Gu Ning ended the topic. They were upset that they weren't able to see any photos of their boss's boyfriend, but they were all looking forward to meeting him. When their classes were about to begin, Gu Ning and her friends were on their way to their classrooms. All of a sudden, a picture emerged in Gu Ning's sight. A construction worker was working at a very high level, but fell at short notice. He struggled for a few seconds before he was dead. Gu Ning was struck dumb. What was going on? Why was such a picture appearing in her sight? Why did it feel so real? Was it a predictive ability? Then where was the construction site? Gu Ning instantly thought of an ongoing construction site of Xinhua real estate. She sensed that something had to be wrong. If she had a predictive ability, what she could predict probably had something to do with herself, and all she could think of now was the Xinhua real estate construction site. Hao Ran, can you lend your car to me? I just remembered that I have something to deal with right now, Gu Ning said to Hao Ran. She couldn't tell them the truth, so she could only lie. Sure. Hao Ran gave the car keys to Gu Ning without hesitation. They didn't ask what Gu Ning was going to deal with. Gu Ning took the car keys, running out without delay. Ning Ning is in a hurry. Is there an emergency? Yu Mixi was a little worried. It seems to be something important, but I think that boss can handle it. Mu Ku said. Although they all believed in Gu Ning, they couldn't help feeling concerned. Gu Ning ran straight to the parking lot, then drove the car ahead at a high speed. She even exceeded the speed limit, but didn't drive forward when there was a red light, because there were many cars ahead. So it was impossible for her to do so. Luckily, it wasn't the rush hour, so the traffic wasn't very heavy. Normally, it would take 15 minutes to drive there, but Gu Ning arrived within 10 minutes. The car stopped abruptly at the gate of the construction site. The security guards at the gate were surprised by the sound, and all ran out to have a look. They complained to themselves thinking, why did the girl stop the car in such a hurry? Gu Ning got out of the car with the Xinhua real estate pass in her hands, walking towards the construction site. And Guangyao had prepared that for Gu Ning earlier on, so that she could enter the company or the construction site at any time. A security guard noticed that she was a student in a school uniform, so he wanted to stop her. Unexpectedly, once he moved near, Gu Ning showed him her pass. The security guard of course didn't believe that she was a worker here, but he didn't ask any further questions because she had the pass. Thus he let her in. However, before she could go inside, she had to put on a helmet. The minute that Gu Ning walked into the construction site, she ran to the building that had appeared in the picture. Everyone around her was confused, and had no idea what was going on. They indeed didn't know that an accident was going to happen soon, and how serious it would be was totally up to Gu Ning now. However, Gu Ning was still late. Just as she got near the building, she heard a horrified exclamation followed by a man falling from the 5th floor. From the predictive picture, the construction worker would be dead within seconds, but he had already fallen down, and Gu Ning failed to stop it, so she could only administer first aid within the few seconds before his death. The horrified exclamation attracted people's sights. However, before they could realize what had happened, they heard a loud sound from the body hitting the ground heavily. Now, everyone was stunned by the scene. Gu Ning arrived at the building just as the worker fell down, so she immediately laid her hands on his chest, giving him her power. Seconds later, people around them finally realized that an accident had happened, and everyone gathered around. "Hey, what are you doing here?" "Exactly. What are you doing?" People questioned Gu Ning continuously, but Gu Ning immediately snapped at them, "Shut your mouths, and call the ambulance right now." Hearing that, someone immediately took out his phone, calling the ambulance. The construction worker's ribs were broken, his internal organs were all damaged, and his right leg was broken too. He would be dead in a normal situation, but Gu Ning's power soon cured his injuries. Although it cost Gu Ning a lot of power, it was an emergency and the construction worker was her own employee. Gu Ning naturally couldn't do nothing. Moreover, if anyone died at the construction site and the news went abroad, the reputation of the company would be affected and the feng shui of its buildings would be in doubt. Gu Ning didn't cure the employee completely, but only prevented him from dying. If he wasn't injured at all or just slightly damaged after falling from such a high level, it would be strange. The construction worker was surprised to find out that he was still alive after he woke up, and there was a touch of disappointment and unwillingness that flashed through his eyes. He's disappointed and unwilling to be alive? Gu Ning noticed his unusual reactions. Apparently, it wasn't an accident, but more like a scheme. The question was why? Gu Ning didn't have time to think about that right now, and she called in Guangyao without delay. "Boss, what's up?" And Guangyao asked like usual. He obviously had no idea about what had just happened at the construction site. "Uncle An accident happened at our construction site. A worker fell from a high level, and he's injured. Come over right now," Gu Ning said. "What?" "Sure, I'll be right there," and Guangyao stood up from his chair in shock. He didn't have time to ask how Gu Ning found out about it, and told his secretary to arrange a car and to inform the construction director. And Guangyao didn't receive the report of the accident until he was about to leave the company. Because a worker at the construction site needed to tell the security room first, and a security guard then called the company, then a worker in the company reported this bad news to the management. After all that, Guangyao was finally able to hear about it. The ambulance arrived earlier than Guangyao and the others. A doctor checked the injured worker for a short time, then took him to the hospital. Gu Ning told a leader at the construction site to go with the doctor, then called in Guang Yao telling him to head to the hospital, and she drove the car, heading to the hospital too. And Guang Yao ordered the construction director to investigate this accident at the site, and he went straight to the hospital. They arrived at the hospital and needed to register first. The manager of Xinhua Real Estate hadn't arrived yet, so Gu Ning had to handle everything in the hospital. And Guang Yao arrived soon after. His secretary went to take care of the injured construction worker, and he went to have a discussion with Gu Ning. "Boss, how did you know that there was going to be an accident at the construction site?" And Guang Yao asked with curiosity. "I had a dream when I was having my break at noon. I dreamt that someone fell from a high building. Although it sounds strange, my dreams and senses are always accurate. Thus I went to check on it myself." Unexpectedly, the accident truly happened. Gu Ning lied with a serious expression. And Guang Yao still believed Gu Ning's explanation without any doubt. Gu Ning was able to win at stone gambling easily, so she had to be an extraordinary human being. "Boss, I can handle it here. Please go back to your school now," and Guang Yao then realized that Gu Ning still had classes to attend. "It's no big deal," Gu Ning replied. She decided to find out the real reason why the worker fell. And Guang Yao didn't insist then. Before long, the examination report of the injured worker was out. One of his ribs were broken, his internal organs were slightly damaged, and his right leg was broken too. Fortunately, his injuries weren't severe, and his life was saved. After that, he had to have surgery and stay in the hospital for a few days. Gu Ning told Guang Yao to arrange a common separate ward for the injured worker, and Guang Yao agreed. There were common separate wards and VIP separate wards, but even a normal separate ward was much better than a ward shared by many patients. Gu Ning then made a round in the separate ward. She set a bug at the bedside and a hidden camera under the TV before she left. When Gu Ning went back to her school, their classes were already over. Gu Ning didn't walk inside, but sent a message to Hao Ran. She was waiting for him at a nearby parking lot. It wasn't convenient that she didn't have a car, but Gu Ning planned to buy one after she entered college in the capital. Gu Ning was wearing Bluetooth earphones since she left the hospital. The earphones were connected to the bug in the separate ward, but she hadn't heard anything useful yet. When Hao Ran and others walked out, Gu Ning gave the car back to Hao Ran, and she ran back to Fanghua Luxury Mansion afterwards. On the way, Gu Ning received a message from a delivery company. Her parcel had already been put into a storage locker on the first floor. Zhou Xinghong sent the parcel to her. The jade pendant that Gu Ning had ordered was in the parcel. Read latest OVLS at nv/e/l/buy.com. Tomorrow was Chu Peihan's birthday, and this jade pendant was her birthday gift. A gift which was worth hundreds of thousands of yuan was delivered by a common delivery company. And Gu Ning really didn't worry about its safety. Gu Ning collected the parcel when she got home, and she sent a message to Zhou Xinghong telling him that it arrived safely. She then took out her laptop from the telepathic eye space in her room, and opened the video being sent from the hidden camera. Everything looked fine. The injured construction worker was called Wang Mao. His family came to visit him and got the compensation from Xinhua Real Estate. That such a terrible accident had happened at the construction site scared some of the workers, but the company promised to find out the real reason and keep them safe, so they quickly calmed down. Around 8 p.m., Wang Mao's wife left the ward to buy food for him. Wang Mao was alone in the ward now. He took out his phone, calling someone. "Hi, it's Wang Mao. I've done what you asked, but I'm still alive," Wang Mao said. Hearing that, Gu Ning squinted. The real troublemaker finally appeared. It was obvious that Wang Mao fell from a high level on purpose, but who was behind this? You trash! Since you failed, I won't give you the rest of the 150,000 yuan. You can take the 50,000 yuan deposit as your administration fee, but don't ever betray me. Otherwise, your whole family will be killed, the other man threatened. It was quiet in the patient room, and Gu Ning had acute hearing, so she heard their talk clearly. Fine. Wang Mao was disappointed, but didn't dare to resist, because he was only an ordinary man. Although he didn't know the other man's identity, he understood that the man could easily kill his family since the man had offered him 200,000 yuan to ruin the reputation of Xinhua real estate. The hidden camera set by Gu Ning was right behind Wang Mao. She did so in order to see the screen of his phone. Get the L-test VLS at .o/v/e/l/buy.co. Gu Ning immediately checked the caller's number. The number was from City G. City G? The first idea that appeared in Gu Ning's mind was Hongyun Real Estate, because she had just grabbed a profitable deal from them. Gu Ning had thought that Hongyun Real Estate would do something to Xingyang Street. Unexpectedly, they couldn't wait and took action in City F now. Although she didn't have solid proof, Gu Ning was sure that Hongyun Real Estate was behind the scheme. She planned to collect evidence first. Since Xinhua Real Estate and Hongyun Real Estate were enemies now, she made up her mind to beat Hongyun Real Estate down. Gu Ning then called in Guang Yao. Uncle In, is it convenient for you now? I have something important to discuss with you, Gu Ning said. Sure, please, and Guang Yao replied. It wasn't because of an accident but because of a scheme that Wang Mao fell from the building, Gu Ning added. What? A scheme? And Guang Yao was astonished. Yes. He looked disappointed when he found out that he was still alive, which was an abnormal reaction. Thus I set up a bug and a hidden camera in his ward, and I heard his conversation with another man on the phone. He said that he had done what he was told to, but failed, Gu Ning said. And Guang Yao took a long breath in. He was surprised by Gu Ning's acute senses. And Guang Yao then realized why Gu Ning asked him to arrange a separate ward for Wang Mao. It was convenient for her to keep an eye on him, and it also gave him a chance to expose himself. Meanwhile, Guang Yao felt a little embarrassed. If Gu Ning hadn't told him, he would have thought that it was a normal accident. Gu Ning continued. The location of his caller's number is City G, so I think that Hongyun Real Estate has to behind it. Hongyun Real Estate? How dare they do that in City F? And Guang Yao was mad. He also understood that Hongyun Real Estate wouldn't give up on Xingyang Street, but to his surprise, they couldn't wait and attacked them right in City F. What should we do next? And Guang Yao asked. He wanted to know Gu Ning's opinion. Hongyun Real Estate failed this time, but I'm sure that they won't stop. You have to be more careful. If some workers try to cause trouble or create a mess at the construction site, write down their names and keep a close eye on them to collect evidence. If they want to quit, let them go, but put their names on the blacklist. Never hire them again, Gu Ning said. It was common that accidents happened at construction sites. As long as the company could handle it well, it would be fine. Sure, and Guang Yao answered. The next day, the news spread aboard. It wasn't actually a serious accident, but some people deliberately made up rumors and it suddenly became big news. It didn't matter if it was true or not, people gradually started to believe it. The rumors greatly affected Xinhua's construction site and reputation. Even if the buildings were done, nobody was willing to buy the houses now, and the company could lose a lot of money. In fact, the buildings were almost finished, and many houses were about to be on sale. However, most potential buyers gave up the idea of buying a house there after the news went aboard. Some real estate companies who had competed for this land also gloated over Shenhua's bad luck, especially Wu Lianqin, who had a long-standing grudge against Guangyao. However, they all knew that it was just a common accident, which was the reason why every real estate company paid a lot for insurance. It depended on the company to handle it well. Insiders were all aware that it couldn't be a simple accident because it spread abroad and became big news within a short time, but nobody knew who was behind it. At the construction site, many workers argued for higher compensation and salary or they would quit the job. And Guangyao went to allay their anxiety in person and raise the compensation, but some still wanted to leave. I don't care about the compensation. What if I fall from a high building someday in the future? I don't want to spend the rest of my life in the hospital. Exactly. If we're disabled or dead, money is useless. Give us our salary and we'll quit. If you don't pay us, we'll sue you and smash everything here. You all have worked at construction sites for a long time, and you should know that accidents happen. If you insist on quitting, I will allow it. Shenhua Real Estate is able to pay you all. And Guangyao said. He was well prepared before he came here today with his financial worker in cash, so he wasn't afraid. However, some hesitated after that. And Guangyao was right. It was dangerous to work on construction sites. And they all knew it clearly when they took the job. Many of them had also witnessed accidents in the past years. Moreover, the company had already paid the compensation and sent the injured worker to the hospital. It would be unreasonable if they all quit just because of the accident. Shenhua Real Estate paid them high salary and compensation, and they were reluctant to leave too. In the end, around 7 workers insisted on leaving, and there were 2 among them who appeared to be extremely active. And Guangyao paid more attention to those 2. Only Guangyao's secretary and lawyer knew that it wasn't an accident, everybody else still didn't know the truth. Therefore, Li Zuan, the lawyer, fixed his eyes on the 2 active workers. The 2 were disappointed that only 7 workers were quitting. Follow the latest novels n/velbin.com. Why don't you leave now? Do you want to be involved in an accident? Exactly. You'll regret it by then. Hearing that, other workers felt like quitting as well. At this time, Li Zuan opened his mouth. You've already gotten your salary, and if you continue to agitate, we can sue you. The 2 immediately shut their mouths. They had achieved their goal after all. Besides, once you quit from Shenhua Real Estate, you'll never be hired here again. Please consider it well before you quit, Li Zuan added. Hearing that, the workers hesitated. A few days later, another rumor that Shenhua Real Estate was going to go bankrupt went aboard. The company had already invested a large amount of money, but the project was stuck. It was likely that it would go bankrupt. However, some also held the opinion that Shenhua Real Estate was different now. Its real boss who could easily acquire it must have the ability to keep it afloat. The company would lose this land at most, but wouldn't go bankrupt. Either way, Shenhua Real Estate was under the spotlight now. Since it caused a sensation, the government sent someone to investigate the case too. The rumor not only affected Shenhua Real Estate, but also affected the government, because the government had sold this land to Shenhua Real Estate. If the rumor was true, the government had made a bad decision. The case wasn't over yet, so the construction site went into a rest period. All the construction workers had paid vacation and would be notified later to resume working. Chu Peihan's birthday was today. She had already booked the hotel and went straight to the 5-star hotel with her friends after classes. And Yi was still in a bad mood because of the bad news of Shenhua Real Estate. Although the Shenhua Real Estate didn't belong to his family now, his father still worked for it. However, today was Chu Peihan's birthday, and he couldn't be absent. In addition, he could do nothing to help his father now. His friends all comforted him that the real boss of Xinhua would handle it if his father couldn't solve the problem. And he then relaxed a little. Chu Xianfeng didn't show up to Chu Peihan's birthday party because he was on a business trip. As the leader of Zhuke Group, Chu Xianfeng was busy dealing with all kinds of business. He barely stayed in City F every month. Chu Xianfeng was also not happy to leave on his sister's birthday, but it wasn't the first time, so he got used to it to some extent. Except for Gu Ning, none of the rest knew about Chu Peihan's background. Chu Peihan always kept it a secret, so they only knew that she had an older brother, but had no idea about her parents' jobs. They became friends with each other because they shared common interests, not because of their families. Everyone showed his or her gift before the meal. Gu Ning was the boss, so she was the first one, but to everyone's surprise, Gu Ning said, "I didn't bring any gift." "What?" "No. Boss, you said that you would give me a precious gift. Do you know how excited I was to receive your gift?" Chu Peihan was upset at once. The rest didn't know what to say, but they didn't believe that Gu Ning came with empty hands. "You said that you didn't care about gifts," Gu Ning said, like she was innocent. "I was just kidding. Don't take it seriously." Chu Peihan felt like crying now. She now understood the feeling of shooting herself in the foot. It was her birthday, and she was so looking forward to the gifts. There, I'm kidding too." Gu Ning laughed. She then took out a box from her backpack. Hearing that, Chu Peihan's face lit up at once. "Boss, I knew it." However, everyone else was surprised. Chu Peihan grabbed the box from Gu Ning without delay. Gu Ning only smiled gently. She opened it immediately. It was a jade pendant in the shape of a rabbit. Chu Peihan wasn't very interested in jewelry, but it was a gift from Gu Ning and her name was on it, so she loved it very much. "What is it?" Everyone surrounded her. "It's a jade pendant in a rabbit's shape." "Boss, you asked us for our Chinese zodiac signs. Are you going to send each of us a jade pendant?" Hao Ran immediately realized why Gu Ning had asked them the question. "Really?" Mu Ke and others all looked to Gu Ning with anticipation. "You're smart and right. I did prepare a jade pendant for each of you, but Peihan's birthday was so near, so hers was finished first. And everybody else will need to wait for a while longer," Gu Ning answered. They were all happy to hear that. Then, Chu Peihan received more gifts from her other friends. After the meal, they went to V5 Bar to have fun. V5 Bar became more popular after what had happened last time because everybody knew that V5 Bar had the support of the Qing gang now. Although some were afraid of the Qing gang, more people thought that it would be safer in V5 Bar. They didn't stay long in the bar, and didn't drink much. Chu Peihan invited her friends to have night snacks afterwards. Just as they left the bar, they heard a noisy argument. A boy and a girl were arguing with another girl. They were all around 17 years old. "Su Anya, that's enough. I told you that we broke up, so stop following me," the boy shouted at the girl in front of him in anger. "Gao Yuchen, how can you be so shameless? If you disliked me and broke up with me early on, I wouldn't say anything, but why did you have to have two girlfriends at the same time and then dump me when I found out? What do you think I am? Am I just a toy in your eyes?" Su Anya argued angrily. Su Anya didn't seem sad, but more annoyed. Hearing that, Gu Ning immediately felt for the girl called Su Anya. She was mad too. "Su Anya, what do you think you are? You're merely a pretty girl who's good at studying. Yu Chen is the heir from a super rich family, while your family is so ordinary. You don't deserve him, and you were with him just because he's rich. It's your honor that Yu Chen was with you for half a year. And now, I'm his only girlfriend, the girl who stood by the boy's side said arrogantly. She even held Gao Yuchen's arm to show her position. Bullshit, it's his honor that I've been with him. He's the heir from a super rich family, and so what? I don't care if you played with other girls before, but you need to bear the result if you don't treat me seriously. Su Anya was furious, and slapped at Gao Yuchen's face. Gao Yuchen didn't have time to avoid it, and was slapped heavily right across his face by Su Anya. Su Anya, are you insane? The girl almost yelled. This is for you, Su Anya said, raising her hand to slap the girl. However, before her hand fell down, Gao Yuchen pushed her with great force. Su Anya was pushed away and stumbled on the curb, falling into the middle of the road. At this time, a private car drove over at a high speed. It was already too late to stop. Everyone around was shocked. The car almost hit Su Anya, but they were all struck dumb, standing still. However, right at this second, a hand grabbed Su Anya's hand, pulling her back to the sidewalk without hesitation. The car just missed Su Anya and stopped right away. If Su Anya hadn't been pulled back, she would have been killed. Everyone looked at the person who had just saved Su Anya with admiration. Su Anya was so scared and trembled in shock. She could barely stand. And the person who just had saved Su Anya was exactly Gu Ning. Boss, are you all right? Hao Ran and others ran to her at once. Although Gu Ning seemed fine, they were still worried. I'm fine, Gu Ning said. Seeing that Su Anya was safe, Gao Yuchen was relieved, but he had no intention to apologize and walked away. Wait! Gu Ning stopped him. Although it had nothing to do with her, she couldn't resist her urge to criticize Gao Yuchen angrily. What? Gao Yuchen was apparently displeased. You almost killed her, and you are just going to walk away like that? Gu Ning asked coldly. She is fine now, Gao Yuchen replied with impatience. She's fine because I saved her, but you can't abdicate your responsibility, Gu Ning said. I didn't do it on purpose, Gao Yuchen said with disdain. He had no sense of guilt at all. You should apologize, Gu Ning criticized. Gao Yuchen was irritated by Gu Ning's attitude. Who are you? And who do you think you are? Check new CHers at novilbin.com. It's not important. The point is you should feel ashamed of what you've done, Gu Ning said in anger. What if I'm not, and what can she do? Gao Yuchen said arrogantly, and gave Su Anya a glance of dislike. He knew that Su Anya didn't know what to do with him. Su Anya already got her mind back, but was still in shock. Seeing Gao Yuchen being so evil, she was more than furious now. Gao Yuchen, Wu Xinyu, I'll definitely pay you back one day in the future. After that, Su Anya pulled Gu Ning, turned around and left. Gu Ning didn't resist, but followed her in leaving. Both Gao Yuchen and Wu Xinyu were mad at Su Anya's threat, but they didn't think that an ordinary girl like her could do anything to hurt them. Hao Ran and others also followed Su Anya. I think that there is probably no good man in this world, Chu Peihan sighed, shaking her head. Hearing that, Hao Ran and other boys immediately retorted, Hey, don't say that just because of that boy. I am a good man right in front of your eyes. Me too. Me too. I don't think so, Chu Peihan thought. They could change in the future. Su Anya didn't stop until they were far away. She bowed to Gu Ning, and thanked her sincerely. Thank you so much for saving my life. If it hadn't been for you, I would be dead already. No big deal, Gu Ning said. Oh, let's have night snacks together. Su Anya said. Are you sure that you are in the mood to eat? Gu Ning asked. Exactly because of what I've just been through, I should treat myself better and I'm not going to cry like a kid. Also, I'll never let him get away with it so easily. Great. Let's have night snacks together then. Gu Ning agreed. They got into 3 taxis afterwards. Gu Ning and the girls took one, while the boys occupied the other 2. Oh, my name's Su Anya. I'm a senior in the number 1 high school. How about you? Su Anya asked. My name's Gu Ning. This is Chu Pei Han, and she's Yu Mixi. We're seniors in the number 3 high school, Gu Ning said. Later, they gathered at a street of night snacks. Su Anya and the others introduced themselves to each other before they walked into a diner that Hao Ran frequently visited. Su Anya was an outgoing girl too, so it was easy for her to be a part of them. They also exchanged their phone numbers and WeChat accounts and were willing to gather together the next time. After the night snacks, they left in different directions. Chu Pei Han and Hao Ran called their private chauffeurs. Yu Mixi and Annie shared the car with Chu Pei Han, while Hao Ran would send Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping home. Mu Ku's home was in another direction, so he took a taxi alone. He was a boy, so it wouldn't be dangerous. During their conversation, Gu Ning found out that Su Anya lived in Fanghua Luxury Mansion too, so the two went home together. Top VL updates on n/o/v/lb/in.com. Everyone knew that Gu Ning was able to protect herself and her friends, so they weren't worried about their safety. After they arrived at Fanghua Luxury Mansion, Gu Ning asked, "Do you need me to send you home?" "No, thanks, it's fine. It's safe here," Su Anya declined. She didn't want Gu Ning to know her real identity yet. "Alright, bye-bye," Gu Ning didn't insist. During the following days, Xinhua Real Estate was still amid endless rumors. Even the staff in Xinhua worked in anxiety. Was Xinhua Real Estate going to fail? Xinhua Real Estate didn't respond to the outside or the inside at all. No one knew what Xinhua Real Estate was planning to do next. Zhou Jinghong called Gu Ning after the accident, but Gu Ning told him to relax and that Xinhua Real Estate would be fine. Hearing Gu Ning's relaxed tone, Zhou Jinghong understood that Gu Ning would be able to handle it well. Jiangsu also asked Gu Ning about the accident. However, just 3 days later, Xinhua Real Estate suddenly summoned a news conference and exposed several recordings as well as videos. The first recording was that of when Wang Mao was talking with a mysterious man on the phone. The mysterious man was the marketing manager of Hongyun Real Estate in City G, Rincong. The second recording and video showed the 2 workers who had incited other workers to strike meeting Rincong secretly. Rincong had caused the accident and purposely spread rumors to ruin Xinhua Real Estate's reputation and ongoing project. Xinhua Real Estate had been greatly affected and lost a lot of money. Its representative made it clear that Xinhua would sue Hongyun Real Estate. After the news conference, everyone was shocked. Because of the recordings and videos, people naturally chose to believe Xinhua Real Estate and the rumors gradually disappeared. People were only confused by the reason why the 2 companies suddenly became enemies, because Xinhua Real Estate was located in City F, while Hongyun Real Estate was in City G. Anyway, the 2 were opponents now. Hongyun Real Estate was also astonished to hear of the news. Fang Changxing couldn't deny the solid proof, so he could only blame Rincong. He claimed that it was Rincong's individual behavior and didn't represent the company. However, when people forgot the scandal, Fang Changxing would keep Rincong safe. Facing the pressure from Fang Changxing, Rincong had to bear the charge. Hongyun gave an official explanation that Rincong was responsible for the acquisition of Xingyang Street, and he hated the fact that Xinhua Real Estate had settled the deal before him, so he tried to get revenge on Xinhua. It was a reasonable explanation, so most people believed it, but there were also a lot of people didn't buy it. Many insiders knew that Fang Changxing was a selfish and evil person, and that he must have ordered Rincong to do so. However, Gu Ning hadn't collected evidence to show that Fang Changxing was connected with Rincong in this scandal, so Fang Changxing was safe for now. And it was just the beginning of the competition between Xinhua Real Estate and Hongyuan Real Estate. After what had happened, Gu Ning made up her mind to destroy Hongyuan. She decided to collect Hongyuan Real Estate's dirty secrets, and she thought of a person who might be of great help. He was the famous hacker K, who had many interactions with Gu Ning in her previous incarnation. However, he had an extremely weird temper, and it was very hard to hire him to do something. Unless he was interested in it, and it was a challenge to him, otherwise he felt like it was an insult to his IQ. Meanwhile, you had to pay 1/3 of your assets to hire him, and your assets had to meet his basic standards. It wasn't a challenge for Kay to get Hongyuan Real Estate's dirty secrets at all, and he wasn't interested in it either. Even if Gu Ning paid him all her assets, he would probably still not do it, because money was nothing in his eyes. The only thing he didn't lack in this world was money, and he only asked for an extremely high payment for fun. However, Gu Ning knew exactly what Kay wanted. His legs became paralyzed after an accident 5 years ago, and now he could only move with the help of his wheelchair. Therefore, the only thing that he wanted in this world was to walk with his legs again. And Gu Ning had her magical power now. As long as he was alive, she could cure any diseases, but she had no idea whether she could help his legs recover to what they had been before. Even so, it was still unbelievable for normal people to walk again. Gu Ning was confident that Kay would agree to help her. She also planned to cure Kay over a long period of time so that he would help her longer. Xinhua Real Estate got the compensation in the end, and the construction site was finally back to normal again. Those who wanted to see Shegua fail had only made a joke of themselves, and Xinhua Real Estate only grew more powerful after this mess. It had successfully grabbed the land from the real estate tycoon in City G. At the same time, those construction workers who had left Xinhua Real Estate were highly regretful now. As for Wang Mao and the other two who had accepted a bribe from Rincong, they were also punished according to the law. Only Rincong got away with it. Although he was mainly responsible for this mess, he couldn't afford the full compensation himself, so Fang Changxing used an excuse to help Rincong pay the compensation to Xinhua Real Estate. After that, Fang Changxing turned to the vice mayor, Liu Shirkuan, to protect Rincong. Unexpectedly, Liu Shirkuan didn't dare to help him because he didn't want to be involved. Liu Shirkuan didn't dare to be involved, neither would Fang Changxing. He was so mad that he wanted to ruin Xinhua Real Estate right now. He had tried once but failed, and now was even more determined to destroy Xinhua. It took almost a week before this problem was solved. During this week, Xinhua Real Estate wasn't the only company that was amid troubles. The Gao family, which was ranked 10th on the list of the richest in City F, had to close 3 restaurants under its name because of poor sanitation. Its reputation was greatly damaged. And the Su family, which ranked 2nd on the list, suddenly stopped cooperating with the branch of Dongheng Real Estate in City F. And the latter lost a fortune. Wu Lianqin, who was the president, was even demoted. City F had suffered a lot in this week. Gu Ning instantly figured it out when she heard that the Gao family, the Su family and the Wu family were involved. Su Anya was from the Su family, and she had gotten revenge on Gao Yuchen and Wu Xinyu. Su Anya didn't seem like an ordinary girl when Gu Ning had met her for the first time. However, to her surprise, Su Anya's family was extremely influential. The Su family was ranked 2nd with 4 billion yuan in assets on the list of the richest in City F. Gu Ning was also surprised to hear that Wu Xinyu was Wu Lianqin's daughter. Hao Ran and the others also had the same idea that Su Anya wasn't an ordinary girl, and that all the news couldn't be a coincidence. Although they were all astonished by Su Anya's real identity, they were more curious to know Gao Yuchen's reaction after he found out his so-called ordinary ex-girlfriend was from the Su family. He must be genuinely regretful. Nobody blamed Su Anya for her revenge, because she could have been killed that day. Although Gao Yuchen hadn't done it on purpose, he had indeed hurt Su Anya, and the Su family of course would punish the Gao family. And the Wu family suffered too. On Thursday night, Gu Ning dialed a number. Someone answered it after a long time. A cold male voice sounded. "Who is it?" "Kay, let's make a deal. I think you'll be interested in the reward," Gu Ning said plainly and without delay when she recognized Kay's voice. "Really? Tell me, what is it?" Kay was curious. "I can cure your legs, and you can get rid of the wheelchair, walking like a normal man. However, I can't promise that your legs will be exactly the same as they were." "What?" Hearing that, Kay was shocked. He was more astonished that she was aware that his legs were paralyzed than that she was able to cure his legs, because there were only a few people who knew his secret. How did she know about it? However, as long as she could cure his legs, he didn't mind how she found out about his secret. Meanwhile, he still doubted whether she could really do it. He didn't care if his legs couldn't fully recover. He only wanted to walk again. Kay tried his best to stay calm and asked, "Are you sure you can cure my legs?" "Why should I believe you? You can have a try, and you'll know. I can administer primary treatment to you first. If it works, you can make your decision then," Gu Ning said. "Sounds good. What's your aim?" Kay asked. "Work for me for a year, and help me investigate whatever I want. I won't make you threaten this country's safety, or investigate state secret. I'll only deal with my enemies," Gu Ning said. "Sure, as long as you can cure my legs, I'll work for you for a year," Kay answered with alacrity. Gu Ning had hit the mark. All he wanted was to walk like a normal man. He wanted to visit many places in this world, and finish his bucket list. He did not want to spend the rest of his life in this wheelchair. Although he doubted Gu Ning's ability, he wasn't willing to miss any chance. "Where shall we meet?" Kay asked. He sounded calm, but he actually couldn't wait. "I live in City F. We can meet wherever you want," Gu Ning said for the sake of Kay's condition. "I'm in City D." He was unwilling to go far. City D was a first-tier city, and was one of the most developed cities in this country. It only took 2 hours to fly to City D from City F. "I'll visit you on Saturday." "I'll call you then," Gu Ning said, then they hung up. On Friday, Su Anya invited Gu Ning and her friends to dine together. Gu Ning understood that Su Anya wanted to celebrate her successful revenge, and it wasn't a bad thing to make friends with Su Anya, so Gu Ning agreed. However, Su Anya was stopped by Gao Yuchen and Wu Xinyu when she left her school. "Su Anya, are you involved in the Gao family and the Wu family's troubles?" Wu Xinyu questioned in anger. Apparently, after the Gao family and the Wu family encountered troubles one by one, Gao Yuchen and Wu Xinyu suspected Su Anya. They didn't believe that Su Anya had the ability, but they couldn't believe that it was a coincidence either. Besides, Gao Yuchen and Wu Xinyu couldn't accept the fact that Su Anya had a close connection with the Su family. Although they hadn't gotten the affirmative answer yet, Gao Yuchen was truly regretful now. Even if Su Anya wasn't an important figure in the Su family, she wouldn't be an ordinary girl either. As long as he could maintain a good relationship with the Su family, his family could benefit a lot from it. "Of course I'm involved. And you should be grateful that I wasn't hit by the car that day, or it wouldn't be as simple as it is now," Su Anya admitted with alacrity. "Anya, I'm so sorry for what I've done. It's all my fault. I made a mistake being with Wu Xinyu. You're the only girl I like. Could you give me another chance? Gao Yuchen immediately begged. Gao Yuchen, Wu Xinyu was furious at once. Su Anya, instead, laughed out loud. Ha ha, ha ha. Gao Yuchen, are you an idiot or something? I'm not stupid. Didn't you dump me because I'm an ordinary girl while she's from a super rich family? I know that I shouldn't have hidden my real identity when I was your girlfriend, but precisely because of that, I was able to see through you. You're merely a selfish hypocrite. You are now begging me to give you a chance just because of my background. Shame on you. After that, Su Anya ignored Gao Yuchen and Wu Xinyu, walking straight by them. Although they were mad at Su Anya's revenge, they didn't dare to do anything because of her real identity. Without hesitation, Wu Xinyu slapped Gao Yuchen across his face with a loud sound. Gao Yuchen, we break up now. Wu Xinyu wanted to be Gao Yuchen's girlfriend because of his background too, but the Wu family wasn't weak either, and she had many choices. She was very proud and couldn't stand the humiliation. In the end, Gao Yuchen lost both of the girls. During the dinner, Su Anya told her newly made friends her real identity, but none of them felt surprised. They also didn't flatter Su Anya just because of her background, because they were real friends. Su Anya wasn't an arrogant girl either, and she hated hypocrisy. Since they were friends now, they should treat each other equally. The same night in City G. In a noisy club, colorful lights shone. Men and women crazily gyrated on the dance floor. The air was full of desire and luxury. Li Jinjin, Su Jing, Lin Wensong and Yuan Sun were among them. Lin Wensong and Yuan Sun had forced Li Jinjin and Su Jing to have sex with them 3 times in this week. Li Jinjin and Su Jing had been tortured every time. It took them a long, painful time to recover. However, once they were recovered, Lin Wensong and Yuan Sun would call them out again, and today was the 4th time. Li Jinjin's plan of killing Lin Wensong and Yuan Sun was still up in the air, because no one took this task. Besides, Li Jinjin didn't know many people who could help her. Even though she wanted Lin Wensong and Yuan Sun to be dead right now, she didn't want to be involved personally. Thus she had done nothing when she had a chance to kill them before. Li Jinjin and Su Jing had even tried to delete the videos on their phones, but they had been discovered. Lin Wensong and Yuan Sun also told them that they had copies of those videos. Li Jinjin and Su Jing were furious, but helpless too. What was worse was that Lin Wensong and Yuan Sun had forced them to use drugs, and they were gradually getting addicted to it. Meanwhile, their desire to get revenge started to fade away. Li Jinjin had called Qin Yifan the other day. She asked him whether there was any possibility that they could be together, but Qin Yifan still rejected her as usual. She was completely heartbroken this time and started living her sexual life with wild abandon. Li Jinjin slept with not only Lin Wensong and Yuan Sun, but with random men as well. Her family sensed that something had to be wrong with Li Jinjin, because in the past she always went out during days, but now she never came back home till it was very late, or she would simply stay out all night. And she never came back home without being drunk. It was already 12 a.m. Li Jinjin was still playing crazily in the bar and she wouldn't answer her parents' calls, which deeply worried her families. Li Jinjin's parents and her older brother Li Jinyu were still awake, sitting in the living room. Li Jinjin's father looked upset while holding his phone in his hand. "Jinyu, what happened to your younger sister? She's totally changed." They thought that Li Jinjin was a grown-up now, and that they shouldn't interfere in her personal affairs. However, she behaved in an increasingly wild and uncontrolled way. "I'm not clear about it. Maybe it's because Qin Yifan likes another girl, and she's unhappy," Li Jinyu said. Hearing that, Li Jinjin's parents could only sigh. Although they all wished that Li Jinjin could marry Qin Yifan didn't like Li Jinjin and wasn't willing to marry her either. They couldn't do anything about it. If they annoyed the Qin family because of that, it would be the last thing the Li family wanted to see. Gu Ning flew to City D early in the morning on Saturday. However, while Gu Ning was on her way to City D, Leng Xiaoting arrived at City F at the same time. He planned to surprise her, but her phone was turned off. Leng Xiaoting thought that maybe Gu Ning was not in City F. She had a company in City G and went to City G often, so Leng Xiaoting guessed that Gu Ning could be in City G. He wasn't sure yet, so he didn't fly to City G abruptly. It was also possible that Gu Ning's phone was dead. Around 11 a.m., Gu Ning arrived at the airport in City D. She didn't notice that Leng Xiaoting had called her until she turned her phone on later. "Hi, where are you now?" Leng Xiaoting asked the minute he answered Gu Ning's call. "I'm in City D now, and I just got off the plane," Gu Ning replied. "I just arrived at City F," Leng Xiaoting said. He sounded a little upset. "What?" Gu Ning was surprised. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "I wanted to surprise you," Leng Xiaoting said, feeling disappointed. Gu Ning didn't know what to say, but she was moved. "Wait for me in City F. I'll be back tomorrow morning." "Fine," Leng Xiaoting answered. After that, Gu Ning called Kay to make an appointment with him. Kay and Gu Ning were going to meet in an exclusive resort called Quanlin Resort. Although Gu Ning had never been there before, she had heard of it and read news about it on the internet. It was a beautiful resort with an outstanding natural view. And it was a place that was safe for celebrities to meet, eat, or discuss business. Only the rich or the authorities could afford it. Gu Ning didn't know how much wealth Kay had, but she knew that he was far richer than her. On the way to the resort from the airport, a picture again emerged before Gu Ning's eyes. A big red truck suddenly lost control and hit a black Kian into the guardrails on a highway. The black Kian fell from the 10-meter-high road and crashed into pieces, which resulted in the death of the 3 people in the car on site. Gu Ning's heart tightened. Since she could see the picture, it must have something to do with her, and she had to stop it from happening. Before long, Gu Ning noticed that a red big truck was driving ahead not far away. She checked its plate, and it was exactly the same one that had shown in the picture before her jade eyes. She immediately used her jade eyes and saw that a black Kian was driving right ahead of the big truck. There was a 10-meter or so gap between the 2 cars, and the big truck was speeding up. They were still 1,000 meters away from the highway. "Hey, would you please drive faster and catch up with the Kian?" "It's my friend's car," Gu Ning urged the driver and told him a lie. "Sure." The driver agreed and sped up immediately. Although the driver sped up, it was still difficult for him to catch up because they were all driving at a high speed. Why is the big truck driving so fast? It is already exceeding the speed limit and is getting near to the Kian. If it doesn't slow down right now, it could be dangerous, the driver complained. Hearing what the taxi driver said, Gu Ning frowned. Even the taxi driver knew that it could be dangerous if the big truck didn't slow down, so why did the driver of the big truck still do it, and even sped up? The big truck must be doing it on purpose. Why? Was it a murder? Although Gu Ning wasn't certain about it, it was possible, because the big truck was behaving strangely. The highway was right before their eyes, and Gu Ning was feeling very anxious. What should she do now? Stop the car right now. When the big truck almost hit the Kian, Gu Ning ordered the taxi driver to stop immediately. The taxi driver instinctively stepped on the brake without hesitation. Gu Ning got out of the car immediately, but right at that moment, the big truck knocked into the Kian, and the latter crashed into the guardrails in an uncontrolled way. If the Cayenne had knocked the guardrails directly, it wouldn't have fallen, but it had already been knocked over the guardrail and was doomed to fall. Gu Ning immediately ran to the Cayenne. Just as half of the Cayenne had already gone over the guardrails, Gu Ning caught one of its wheels, which were still on the safe side of the guardrail. She used her magical power to improve her strength and stabilize the car. The two back wheels of the car were forced to get stuck in the guardrails. However, it was still very dangerous. If Gu Ning wasn't powerful enough to hold it, it would fall anyway. Gu Ning's power was limited, and it was being consumed in a large amount within a short period of time. If the people in the car couldn't be rescued soon, the car would still fall down when Gu Ning lost the support from her power. Everyone around was shocked by the scene. How powerful this girl is! And she must be super brave to risk her own life to catch the wheel. She could fall too. Because of that accident, all the cars behind them stopped, and some warm-hearted men came to help Gu Ning one by one. However, they all could only stabilize the car, and it was impossible for them to pull it back. They needed a crane. Some called the police, and some called the ambulance, while some were busy taking pictures as well as videos of the unusual scene. A piece of news soon appeared on the internet: a car accident on a highway in City D. A brave and powerful girl caught its wheel. Pictures attached. The first picture was Gu Ning holding the wheel alone, and in the second picture, many went to help Gu Ning pull on the back of the car, but their faces weren't clear because of the long distance. 2/3 of the Cayenne was knocked over the guardrail, and it was highly possible to fall. Thus no one thought that it was a show and that Gu Ning was deliberately attracting people's attention. Instead, they were all astonished by Gu Ning's bravery and strength. Jesus! How does she do it? I think that she isn't an ordinary human being. She was able to grab hold of the wheel and stabilize the car right on time. Indeed! It's incredible! The news went viral on the internet and caused a sensation within a short time. When a government worker noticed the car plate in the picture, he was stunned and called the mayor's private number at once. The mayor was also shocked to hear the news. He immediately took a car, heading to the site in person. LL news tirais at N0V/LBI/.cm. Moreover, he also called the directors of the Public Security Department as well as the Fire Department and the head of the Central Hospital. It seemed that the people in the Cayenne were very important. However, the crowd had no idea of that yet. Around 10 minutes later, the fire brigade arrived and immediately started directing a rescue. Ambulances arrived soon after. Just as the Cayenne was pulled back, the directors of the Public Security Department as well as the Fire Department and the head of the Central Hospital arrived one by one. Everyone was astonished and curious about the people in the Cayenne's identity. The owner of the car must be an important figure. It cost Gu Ning too much power, and she was exhausted, sinking to the ground. She was surprised too, but had no energy to think about it now. She planned to walk away quietly, but a nurse found her and put her into an ambulance without delay. Gu Ning wasn't able to resist at all right now, and decided to have a rest first. Unexpectedly, she fell sound asleep afterwards, and missed the call from K. K had been waiting for her for a long time and lost his patience. He called her twice and a doctor answered it the second time. "Miss Gu, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Where are you right now?" K was apparently displeased. "Hi, the girl was in an accident just then, and she is in the hospital now." "May I know your relationship with her?" the doctor said politely. "What? She was in an accident?" Kay was greatly surprised. "Yes, there was a car accident on the highway. She's in a deep sleep now after she used her full force to pull on the car's wheel." The doctor thought that Kay was Gu Ning's friend, so he told him the truth. "What? She is the girl who pulled the car's wheel?" Kay was amazed. While he was waiting for Gu Ning, he surfed the internet to kill time, and he had also read the news about the accident. To his astonishment, the girl in the picture was actually Gu Ning. Kay now thought highly of Gu Ning, and was even more interested in her. Which hospital was she admitted to? Kay asked. He planned to visit her. Gu Ning had promised to cure his legs, so he didn't want to miss the chance. In addition, what Gu Ning did had won his trust. The center hospital, patient room V11, the doctor said. The atmosphere in another VIP patient room was depressing. A man who was around 50 years old was lying on the patient bed. He had a pair of sharp, bright eyes, and no one dared to meet his gaze. The man also had an air of power and coldness, which terrified people around him. Vice Governor, the driver of the truck is already in custody, but we haven't gotten his testimony yet, a middle-aged man said with great respect. The man who was lying on the patient bed was the Vice Governor of Province D, Xiao Changchun. And the middle-aged man was the director of the Public Security Department, Fu Wenwu. It has to be Lu Guolai or Zhao Feilong, another man in his early 40s said in anger. He was the mayor of City D, Jiangbowen. Lu Guolai was the deputy secretary of the provincial party committee in City D, while Zhao Feilong was the governor of Province D. Zhao Feilong, Lu Guolai and Xiao Changchun were competing against each other for a significant position, so they all wanted to destroy the other two. Although both Zhao Feilong and Lu Guolai were in higher positions than Xiao Changchun now, Xiao Changchun's achievements and reputation were better than theirs, so they felt threatened. Read the latest stories novilbin.com. Oh, how are the chauffeur, Secretary Young, and that young girl? Xiao Changchun asked with care. He now looked gentler. The big truck had hit them heavily, but Xiao Changchun, who had sat in the back row, had survived because of his seat belt. He was only slightly injured, but had passed out because of the force. The chauffeur and Secretary Young are fine. The young girl only ran out of energy, and is in a deep sleep right now, Jiang Bowen said. Great, we must thank her, Xiao Changchun ordered. Although he thought that the girl wasn't simple, he had no intention to investigate her, because she had just saved his life. No problem, but how? Money or something else? Jiang Bowen asked. Give her 100,000 yuan as a reward and prize for her bravery, Xiao Changchun said. Money was probably the most practical reward, and it wasn't appropriate for a government official to give her a house or a car. Sure, I'll arrange it right away, Jiang Bowen said. He immediately called his secretary to handle it. Gu Ning opened her eyes, and a young good-looking face came into her sight. She got a fright and sat up abruptly. Kay, why are you here? Kay felt a little dissatisfied at Gu Ning's great reaction, but he was surprised to hear what Gu Ning had said. He squinted and seemed dangerous. Do you know me? There were only a few people who knew who he was. How come she knew him? Gu Ning immediately regretted saying that, but she couldn't tell him that they had met before in her previous incarnation. If she did, she would expose her secret of being reborn. Thus Gu Ning could only explain, I'm sensitive to voices and I heard your voice just now, so I assumed that it had to be you when I opened my eyes. Gu Ning did hear someone talking, but she wasn't sure whether it was Kay or not. If Kay denied it, she could make up an excuse saying that it was a coincidence. Seeing that Gu Ning was calm, Kay chose to believe her, and he did say something just then. Hey, how come you're so strong and brave to pull the car and prevent it from falling? Kay asked with curiosity. Because I'm willing to help others and I'm full of energy. Gu Ning replied with sincerity. Although she didn't want to be involved in trouble, she couldn't stand aside when she saw that others were in trouble. Fine, Kay said. And when can you cure my legs? Kay asked, because he couldn't wait. We can try it now, Gu Ning said. She stood up, taking out a glass flask from her backpack. This is the medicine that I've prepared for you. Drink it first, and I'll help you massage your legs. You'll start feeling something. Kay stared at the so-called black medicine in the glass kettle and frowned with obvious dislike. Are you sure this medicine is safe? Although he believed Guning to some extent now, he didn't fully trust her. They were merely strangers after all. He came to meet her just because he didn't want to miss any chance. If you're worried, you can have another person who you trust act as a witness. If you're in danger, he can capture me, Guning said airily, like she didn't care. Kay also knew that nothing good came without risk. In fact, the medicine was only a normal medicine to improve a person's sleep. Guning used it as a cover, the major part was the massage. Wow, come on in, Kay called at someone outside. A young man walked in at once, and Kay ordered, I'm going to take this medicine that she gave me. If I'm in danger, you can capture her and hand her to the police. Boss, Guahao was concerned. Kay ignored him, opening the lid, and drank the medicine. It had acrid smell and tasted terrible, but Kay drank it. Afterwards, Guning bent in front of his wheelchair and massaged his knees. She did it randomly, because the point was to insert her power into his legs. With the help of the power, Kay immediately felt more comfortable, and his paralyzed legs started to have feelings, which greatly surprised Kay. Guning did it. However, right at that moment, Guning stopped massaging. All that she had needed to do was to make Kay believe in her ability. How do you feel? Guning asked. Boss, how are you doing? Guahao also asked with anxiety. I think I'm recovering. Kay was thrilled. Really? Guahao was excited too. Miss Gu, how long will it take to fully cure my legs? Kay asked with alacrity. We'll do the treatment 3 times in alternate weeks. Your muscles will recover the first time, and your joints will heal the second time. The third time, you'll be able to walk, Guning said. Am I dreaming? Kay's body trembled slightly in surprise. It was too good to be true for him. You're not, Guning said with confidence. Very well, I trust you, and I'll work for you for a year, Kay said. Great! Although Guning was confident that Kay would agree, she was finally relieved to get his affirmative answer. Kay reached out his hand to shake Guning's. It's very nice meeting you. Then, Guning inserted her power into Kay's legs again to recover his muscles. Kay's legs regained its feeling, which made Kay and Guahao feel extremely excited. However, the joints in Kay's legs were still badly damaged, so he couldn't walk for now. After the first treatment, Guning said, I need your help right now, but I don't think that it is a good place to discuss it here. I'm starving right now. Why don't we talk on the way to the restaurant? She hadn't eaten in a long time. Sure, let's go now. Kay agreed. Then Guahao pushed Kay's wheelchair followed by Guning, heading outside. They had to tell the doctor first before leaving. However, just as they left the patient room, Jiang Bowen met them face to face and stopped them. Hi, you're finally awake. Where are you going now? Jiang Bowen asked Guning. Nice to meet you, Mayor Jiang. I'm fine now, and I'm going to tell my doctor before I leave with my friends, Guning replied. She behaved calmly in front of Jiang Bowen. You're leaving? Jiang Bowen was surprised that this young girl asked for nothing after what she had done. Nevertheless, you've done a great thing. We haven't rewarded you yet, Jiang Bowen said. He scrutinized Guning to see whether she was truly modest. Guning smiled and said, Mayor Jiang, I did it out of my own willingness, and I won't ask for any reward. However, I only hope that I've saved an honest and upright official. Very well, you're very kind and modest. I admire you. Jiang Bowen complimented her plainly. However, you've made a great achievement, and you deserve the reward. Well, how about this? I can fulfill a wish of you, as long as it's legal. If you encounter any trouble in the future, you can turn to me for help, Jiang Bowen said, handing his name card to Gu Ning. That would be so great. Gu Ning didn't reject, and took the name card. Mayor Jiang, please do not expose me in this accident. I don't want to be involved in unnecessary trouble. This car accident was an attempt at murder. If the killer knew that she ruined his plan, he wouldn't let her get away with it. Jiang Bowen was also aware of it, so he agreed to protect Gu Ning. Don't worry. I'll handle it, Jiang Bowen said to Gu Ning. Thanks, Gu Ning said. After that, they said goodbye to Jiang Bowen. Mayor, I think that she probably wanted your favor more than a reward, Jiang Bowen's secretary said behind him after Gu Ning was gone. Jiang Bowen had the same thought, but he didn't care. She saved the vice governor's life. And my favor is nothing compared to that. Indeed, Xiao Changchun's life was much more important than a little favor. If Xiao Changchun had been killed in the car accident, a powerful group in the politics would have lost an essential figure. Jiang Bowen added then, she didn't ask for my favor on her own initiative. I think she's an honest girl, and accepted my favor just because she didn't want to turn me down. In addition, he only promised to fulfill a legal wish for her. Even if she really turned to him for help one day in the future, he believed that it wouldn't be difficult for him to solve it. His secretary agreed with him. They were politicians, and it was necessary to be careful. You had to have done that on purpose. Even Kay had the same thought about Gu Ning. The mayor owed her a favor, which was of great use in the future. It's not important. He proposed it himself, and why can't I take it? Gu Ning said. Well, I'm surprised that you asked for nothing after you saved an important figure's life. Kay admired Gu Ning for what she had done. He probably couldn't be so altruistic himself. I don't need their support right now, so I didn't ask for anything. However, I needed your help, so I offered to cure your legs for a reason, Gu Ning said. Discover NW Chapter SNN0EL by.com. Kay was stunned. Gu Ning had rescued Xiao Changchun for nothing, but asked him to work for her for a year. Kay felt a little displeased, but he was even willing to work for her for 2 years as long as she could cure his legs. In the VIP patient room, Jiang Bowen reported his talk with Gu Ning to Xiao Changchun. Xiao Changchun also believed that Gu Ning was a good girl who took Jiang Bowen's name card just because she didn't want to reject his kindness. And it was Jiang Bowen who promised to help her in the future. Xiao Changchun had a good impression of Gu Ning after this accident. She had saved his life after all. On the way to Quanlin Resort, Gu Ning told Kay that she planned to investigate Hongyun real estate in City G, and she didn't hide her grudge with Hongyun. Kay was astonished after that. How old are you now? You must be younger than 20, and you have already started running a business? It's unbelievable. Kay said with amazement. Kay was an ace hacker, but he didn't know how to run a company at all, so he admired Gu Ning. No problem. I'll send the materials to you once I find some, Kay said. After the meal, it was already 4 p.m. Gu Ning checked the plane tickets back to City F, because Leng Xiaoting had just arrived in City F, and she missed him. She had finished the deal in City D anyway. However, there were no plane tickets going to City F right now, and the last one would take off in half an hour. Gu Ning couldn't catch it, so she could only wait till tomorrow. She then decided to stay in the Quanlin Resort, and Kay generously paid the fee for Gu Ning. After Kay left, Gu Ning decided to take a walk around the Quanlin Resort. Quanlin Resort was surrounded by beautiful mountains and lakes with a beautiful, natural view. It was indeed a pleasure to stay here. Gu Ning took a photo and a selfie with the view, sending it to Leng Xiaoting. Leng Xiaoting had just wanted to call Gu Ning when he received her message. Gu Ning beamed in the photo, and Leng Xiaoting's heart lost a beat. He wanted to kiss her, now. Leng Xiaoting, where is this place? Gu Ning, Quanlin Resort. It's so beautiful. Leng Xiaoting, I see. Discover new stories at nv/lbin.c/o. Then they stopped texting. After 45 minutes, Gu Ning was about to go back. She turned around and noticed a familiar figure walking towards her. Gu Ning was stunned. Leng Xiaoting? Why is he here? Gu Ning rubbed her eyes to check whether it was real, but the man was still approaching her. Why are you here? Gu Ning asked. It felt so unreal. I missed you, so I came here. Leng Xiaoting stood in front of Gu Ning, staring at her. There was obvious loneliness and deep love in his eyes. Leng Xiaoting wasn't a man who loved to say sweet nothings, but he was a doer. Gu Ning almost cried. He missed her so much that he couldn't wait for a day. She had the same feeling actually. She knew that Leng Xiaoting was in City F, and she was eager to fly back to his side, but she failed to catch the last plane. Let's have a tour around, Gu Ning said. Sure, Leng Xiaoting said. Gu Ning held Leng Xiaoting's hand naturally. Leng Xiaoting's body stiffened unconsciously. He wasn't used to it yet, because it was the first time they had been so close. He of course loved the feeling, and immediately clasped Gu Ning's hand in his big palm, as if he was afraid to lose her. The two walked for a while longer, then took a break on the bench. Let's take a photo together, Gu Ning said. Leng Xiaoting was a little anxious, because he wasn't accustomed to taking selfies. Gu Ning sat near Leng Xiaoting raising her phone, and took a picture of them sitting together. Gu Ning beamed, while Leng Xiaoting remained expressionless, but both of them looked beautiful in the picture. Within a second, Gu Ning finished taking the picture. The two matched each other so well in the photo. Send it to me, Leng Xiaoting said. This was the first photo of them, and he would carry it with him. Whenever he missed her in the future, he could look at the photo. No problem, Gu Ning said, and immediately sent it to him. She focused on their faces in the photo for a long time with excitement. When it was almost 6 p.m., Gu Ning asked Leng Xiaoting, "What do you want to have for dinner?" Up to you, Leng Xiaoting said. Gu Ning wasn't hungry yet, but Leng Xiaoting flew all the way from City F, coming to her. He could be starving now. Let's go to the restaurant first, Gu Ning said. They then walked to the restaurant. Leng Xiaoting and Gu Ning met a group of people at the door of the restaurant. To Gu Ning's surprise, she was familiar with the leading two men. Yan Jinlin was here, and the man beside Yan Jinlin was Jiang Bowen, who she had just met today. What a coincidence! Girl Gu, what are you doing here? Before Gu Ning could say a word, Yan Jinlin already saw her and was apparently excited. He strode to Gu Ning without delay. Jiang Bowen was astonished by the scene instead. Do they know each other? Obviously, they knew each other, and they seemed very close. Are they relatives? Uncle Yan, what a coincidence! I came to City D to deal with something. How about you? Gu Ning asked. Me too, Yan Jinlin said. He then said to Leng Xiaoting, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Leng." Nice to meet you too, Mayor Yan, Leng Xiaoting nodded to Yan Jinlin. Oh, Miss Gu and Master Yan are friends? Jiang Bowen walked over. Nice to meet you, Mayor Jiang, Gu Ning said to Jiang Bowen. What? You two know each other too? Yan Jinlin asked. He was shocked that Gu Ning could always get to know important figures wherever she came. The girl I told you about today is Miss Gu, Jiang Bowen said. What? It was you? Yan Jinlin rounded his eyes in astonishment. He had already heard of what had happened to Xiao Changchun. To his astonishment, the girl who had stabilized the car was Gu Ning. However, he knew that Gu Ning wasn't an ordinary girl, so he believed that Gu Ning was able to do that. Ling Xiaoting looked to Gu Ning with doubts. Gu Ning panicked a little, because she didn't want to worry him. Ling Xiaoting noticed Gu Ning's small reactions, and he had a sense that she must have done something he wouldn't be happy to know about. Girl Gu, you indeed surprise me, Yan Jinlin said. It had been so dangerous, and she could have fallen too. She had indeed risked her own life, but luckily, both Xiao Changchun and Gu Ning were fine now. Master Yan, is Miss Gu your relative? Jiang Bowen asked. Not really, she's a good friend of my father, and my lifesaver. I told you the story last time, Yan Jinlin said. What? Hearing that, Jiang Bowen was more than shocked. Gu Ning was the girl who had saved Yan Jinlin's life from the sniper's shot. Jesus! This young girl is truly amazing. Gu Ning, instead, felt slightly embarrassed to see them being shocked. Noticing that, Yan Jinlin immediately dropped the topic. Girl Gu, are you here to have dinner? Let's dine together. Thanks, we would love to, but we have something to discuss in private, Gu Ning declined. Gu Ning also knew that Yan Jinlin was just being polite. They must have come here to dine together for something important. Indeed, Yan Jinlin and the others came all the way here to talk about something serious. However, if Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting were willing to have a meal with them, they wouldn't mind it either. Since Gu Ning declined, he wouldn't insist. Well, then we'll go inside first. After that, they separated. When Yan Jinlin and others were gone, Ling Xiaoting fixed his eyes on Gu Ning and asked, Why did you panic? Gu Ning understood that she couldn't hide it from Ling Xiaoting. If Ling Xiaoting had read the news, he would recognize her at the first sight. Thus she could only tell him the truth. There was a car accident on the highway this morning. A car was knocked over the guardrail. I ran to catch its wheel and stabilize the car. The people in the car were rescued. That's all. Hearing that, Ling Xiaoting had mixed emotions. He was mad at Gu Ning's abrupt behavior, and she had even risked her own life to save others. No matter who the people that Gu Ning had saved were, no one was more important than Gu Ning in his heart now. Ling Xiaoting was still worried about her, even though the accident had already passed. What if she had fallen from the highway along with the car? He couldn't imagine it, and he was reluctant to experience the feeling of losing someone he cared about the most again. Fortunately, Gu Ning was fine now, or he sincerely wouldn't know what to do. Ling Xiaoting was mad, but he was more concerned about Gu Ning. Seeing Ling Xiaoting being unhappy and worried, Gu Ning felt slightly guilty. She held his hand and said, I promise I won't do it again. Although it wasn't really dangerous for Gu Ning, it was super dangerous in the eyes of those who didn't know her ability. Ling Xiaoting relaxed a little, and clasped Gu Ning's hand. He only wanted her in this world. He was truly afraid of losing her. After the meal, it was already dark. Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting ambled in the resort. It had a breathtaking view at night. They noticed a theater, and Gu Ning proposed watching a movie together. Ling Xiaoting agreed. It was almost 10 p.m. when they walked out of the theater. They went back to the hotel and wanted to book a room. Unexpectedly, the hotel was fully booked. There is no vacant rooms tonight. Would you mind staying in my room for a night? There is a sofa in my room, Gu Ning said. She was nervous, and summoned up all her courage to say that. She didn't want Leng Xiaoting to think that she was an easy girl. Leng Xiaoting felt a little uneasy too, but there was no other room available tonight. He could leave Quanlin Resort, but he wasn't willing to, so he agreed. On the way to the room, the two couldn't help thinking about what was going to happen when they stayed in the same room for a night. Both of them flushed and their hearts were pounding fast. No one talked along the way. However, they were boyfriend and girlfriend now. So it was common that they stayed together. Even if they slept with each other, it was no big deal because they were in love. The minute that they walked inside the room, Gu Ning said, "You're taller, and you can sleep in the bed. I'll sleep on the sofa. You can sleep in the bed, and I'll use the sofa." Leng Xiaoting wasn't willing to let Gu Ning sleep on the sofa. It was uncomfortable. "The sofa is too small for you," Gu Ning said. "It's fine," Leng Xiaoting said, then he walked to the sofa and sat down. "There is no other quilt," Gu Ning said, suddenly realizing it. "No big deal. The air conditioner is on." "I'm not cold," Leng Xiaoting said. "Why don't we sleep in the bed together?" Gu Ning said unconsciously, but she was soon shocked by her own words. Leng Xiaoting was struck dumb for a second. He felt the blood in his body was moving faster and faster, and didn't dare to look at Gu Ning again. Ariad updated estirise at n/vel/bin.com. Gu Ning added at once, "The bed is big enough for two." Which meant that they wouldn't be touching each other, even if they slept in the bed together. Leng Xiaoting was struggling to make the decision. He was eager to be near Gu Ning, but didn't want to scare her. In the end, Leng Xiaoting agreed. Afterwards, Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting only took off their coats, lying in the bed together. The bedside lamp was on, but it was a little dim. Maybe because it was still too early, or maybe because they were both nervous, no one was asleep but they didn't talk either. All of a sudden, Gu Ning's phone vibrated on a table beside her. The night was too quiet, so the abrupt sound scared Gu Ning for a second. The caller was Situ Yi. Why was he calling her at night? "Hi, Mr. Situ," Gu Ning answered it. Leng Xiaoting immediately felt a sense of being threatened. "Hey, are you home now? I'm in City F now. Why don't we have night snacks together?" Situ Yi invited gently. "Oh, what a shame. I'm not at home right now. I'm in City D," Gu Ning said. Leng Xiaoting, instead, was displeased with her tone. Situ Yi was disappointed. He came to City F to meet Gu Ning, but she was absent. He thought that if Gu Ning wasn't in City G, then she would be in City F. "When will you be back?" Situ Yi asked. "Tomorrow," Gu Ning replied. "Very well, then let's dine together tomorrow when you're back," Situ Yi said. "Sure." Gu Ning wouldn't reject since she was free tomorrow. Gu Ning also noticed that Leng Xiaoting wasn't happy about Situ Yi's call, but she wasn't clear why the man was displeased. She and Situ Yi were just common friends after all. And she couldn't stop meeting new men, because she needed to build up her network. Gu Ning rolled to face Leng Xiaoting and asked, "Are you being jealous just because I have a male friend?" "He is chasing you." Leng Xiaoting didn't deny the fact that he was jealous, but if Situ Yi wasn't chasing Gu Ning, he wouldn't be jealous. "What? No." Gu Ning was quite surprised. She didn't believe it, because she didn't think that Situ Yi treated her differently. "How do you know that?" Gu Ning asked. "Man's instinct," Leng Xiaoting said with confidence. Haha, Gu Ning couldn't help laughing out loud. Even if Situ Yi was chasing her, she wouldn't accept him. Do you lack self-confidence, or don't you trust me? Gu Ning joked. Ling Xiaoting looked at Gu Ning deeply, but remained quiet. He didn't know the answer either. Gu Ning knew what was in Ling Xiaoting's mind. Even if he didn't trust her, she wouldn't blame him. They had just been together for a short time, and it was normal that he felt insecure. If Gu Ning hadn't been familiar with Ling Xiaoting, she would have felt threatened too, because the man was so handsome and sexy. Unless you betray me, I won't hurt you, Gu Ning promised with sincerity to allay Ling Xiaoting's worries. She then approached him and gave him a light kiss. However, Ling Xiaoting wasn't willing to let her go after he got to enjoy the taste. He immediately kissed her with great force. Ling Xiaoting wasn't skillful at kissing, so it took him a while to find the right way. His lips rubbed across hers for a long time before his tongue went in between her beautiful teeth and into her mouth. He pressed her to him, and her whole body was under his. It was the first time that Gu Ning had been so close to a man. She lost all her energy, indulging herself in the warmness. They shared a lingering kiss, and Ling Xiaoting started to get dissatisfied with the status quo. His hands began to move around her body. Gu Ning trembled out of sexual excitement. Although she didn't mind making love with Ling Xiaoting, she wasn't mentally prepared yet, so she wanted to push him away. However, she tried in vain, because her body had already given up. She could only let Ling Xiaoting continue kissing her passionately. Feeling that Gu Ning was a little out of breath, Ling Xiaoting's kiss moved to her cheeks and neck. Her skin was smooth and smelled so good due to the nourishment of her power. Ling Xiaoting just couldn't stop. All of a sudden, a loud sound of someone closing a door outside surprised Ling Xiaoting. He got his mind back at once. Although this hotel had outstanding sound insulation, with his acute hearing, Ling Xiaoting was able to hear any sound outside. Seeing Gu Ning flushed with slightly swollen lips, Ling Xiaoting panicked. Ning Ning, I'm sorry, It's fine. Gu Ning took a long breath in to calm herself down, and smiled gently. She didn't mind, but was simply not mentally prepared yet. Ling Xiaoting didn't dare to continue, and tried to fall asleep with Gu Ning in his arms, but it was very hard for a man to sleep right after such a long, passionate kiss. Gu Ning, on the other hand, fell asleep within a short time. Ling Xiaoting didn't fall asleep until it was very late. The next morning, Ling Xiaoting was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window thinking about something when Gu Ning woke up. What are you thinking? Gu Ning opened her mouth. Ling Xiaoting turned back, looking at her. Oh, nothing. Do you want to have breakfast out or in here? Let's go out. The plane will be taking off at 9:30 a.m. We can have breakfast before we head to the airport, Gu Ning said. They packed up and went to the restaurant for breakfast. There were exclusive shuttle cars in the restore, so Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting took the car arranged by the hotel. Gu Ning called Kay after her breakfast and told him that she was leaving for City F. Kay proposed to send her to the airport, but Gu Ning declined. Gu Ning didn't avoid Ling Xiaoting, so he got to know the reason why Gu Ning came to City D this time, from their talk on the phone. After they hung up, Ling Xiaoting asked with surprise, "You can cure disease?" Yes, Gu Ning didn't deny it, nor explain further. However, Ling Xiaoting was slightly dissatisfied that Gu Ning flew all the way to City D just to make a deal with the man on the phone. If you wanted to investigate something, why didn't you ask me for help? Gu Ning explained, You've already helped me a lot, but I can't count on you forever. And I need a helpful assistant. He's a famous hacker called K. It's to my great advantage that he's willing to help me. Ling Xiaoting didn't insist then. He knew that Gu Ning was running a startup and needed talent, so he wouldn't prevent her from hiring skilled workers and building a network. The only thing he needed to do was to give her a helping hand when she needed and stop other men who wanted to chase her from getting near. When they arrived at City F, they went to dine in a restaurant first. After the meal, Ling Xiaoting was unwilling to be apart from Gu Ning, so Gu Ning didn't go home right away. Instead, they went to the Street of Antiques. She hadn't been to the Street of Antiques for a long time, and she missed the time when she could pick up a real antique from a stand by accident. Ling Xiaoting was of course willing to do anything as long as he was with Gu Ning. Ling Xiaoting immediately called someone to send a car to him. After 10 minutes, the car arrived. Ling Xiaoting then drove the car, going to the Street of Antiques with Gu Ning. On the way, Gu Ning called Gu Man and told her mother that she was back, and would be back home tonight. The Street of Antiques was still the same as the first time that Gu Ning had been here. Most of the objects were fake and it was hard to find a real one. "Do you like antiques?" Ling Xiaoting asked, seeing Gu Ning so focused on the objects. "Yes," Gu Ning answered. "I have some, I'll send them to you later," Ling Xiaoting said. "Well, I just enjoy discovering and picking up a real one from a mass of them." "I'm not really interested in collecting them," Gu Ning said. After a long while, Gu Ning noticed an object with power. It was a 30-centimeter wide pastel plate with patterns of 9 peaches and 5 bats. The white plate was crystal clear with a smooth texture. It was a great advertisement for Yongjing pastels. The background color of the plate and the color of the painting around it were both pure and fine. The two colors combined together producing effects of elegance and nobility. Therefore, people might think that it was a fake, and outsiders would never believe that it was real, even if there were 2 vertical lines of words saying Yongjing period, Qing dynasty in blue and white on the bottom of the plate. The patterns around the plate were light and obvious at the same time. The color of the peaches was red, but not bright, and changed naturally from yellow to red. Every touch of the painting pen was precisely accurate. The peach blossoms had long leaves with sides that were bright in the front and darker in the back. The front sides of the leaves were green, while the back sides were bluish and dark, which reflected the differences under the light. The leaves were densely distributed and reasonably dynamic, matching the iron red bats so well. Gu Ning asked about its price. It only cost 2,000 yuan, so Gu Ning paid the money without hesitation. Ling Xiaoting wanted to pay for Gu Ning, but Gu Ning declined. It would be meaningless if he paid. Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting continued walking ahead with the plate. Get your Avrite ovals at no/v/e/lbn.com. Seconds after Gu Ning and Ling Xiaoting were gone, a middle-aged man came quickly with an old man who was around 70 years old. They stopped at the stand where Gu Ning bought the pastel plate. "Master, this is the middle-aged said. However, before he could finish, he was struck dumb when he glanced over the stand. Then he was shocked and raised his voice asking, "Where is the pastel plate with patterns of 9 peaches and 5 bats?" The stand owner didn't know why the man was so emotional, but he recognized the old man who stood beside him. He was the curator of the museum and the leader of the Antiques Association, Gu Changjiang. The middle-aged man had visited the same stand a while before. He had stared at the pastel plate for a long time, but still left in the end. Now he came back with an antique expert to check it again. All of a sudden, the stand owner had a sense that the pastel plate could be real. "Hey, I'm asking you something," the middle-aged man said again. The stand owner replied at once, "Oh, I sold it already." "What?" The middle-aged man couldn't accept it. Although he wasn't completely certain that it was real, he was confident that it could be real. That was the reason why he went to invite his master and came back again. Within minutes, the pastel plate was sold. It was terrible news for him. The stand owner swallowed with great force. He couldn't help thinking to himself, "Is the pastel plate real?" If it was real, he would have lost a fortune. The stand owner regretted now. "Who's the buyer?" the middle-aged man asked. The buyer could still be around. It's a teenage girl with a young man, the stand owner replied. Where did they go? The middle-aged man asked again. To the right, the stand owner answered. Master, let's catch up to them. I think we can probably still meet them, the middle-aged man said. They wanted to buy the plate as part of a collection. Wait a second. Seeing that they were leaving, the stand owner immediately asked with anxiety, Is the plate real? I'm not sure yet, the middle-aged man said, then he ignored the stand owner, walking quickly to the right with Gu Changjiang. Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting walked slowly, so the middle-aged man and Gu Changjiang caught them up within a short time. Gu Ning was holding the pastel plate in her hands, so they instantly recognized her. Hey, please wait a moment. The middle-aged man immediately stood in Gu Ning's way. Although it was impolite, he didn't have time to waste. Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting then stopped. Both of them thought that the man must have something urgent. However, when Gu Ning noticed Gu Changjiang who was standing by the middle-aged man's side, she immediately understood what was going on. Master Gu, nice to meet you, Gu Ning said. Do you know me? Gu Changjiang was surprised. Gu Ning looked familiar in his eyes, but he couldn't remember where they had met before. Gu Ning smiled gently. We met at Master Qin's birthday party. I'm Gu Ning. Oh, it's you. Gu Changjiang then got his memory back. Gu Ning had worn makeup back then, and now she didn't wear any makeup, so Gu Changjiang failed to recognize her in the beginning. However, he did remember her name. The reason that you were looking for me must be for this pastel plate. Am I right? Gu Ning asked. Exactly. My student just walked by the stand and noticed this plate. He wasn't sure whether it was real, so turned to me for help. However, when we came back, it was already sold, Gu Changjiang said. Since you want to see it, please help yourself. Gu Ning then handed the pastel plate to Gu Changjiang. Gu Changjiang was thrilled. I think that we better find a place to have a closer look at it. Gu Ning agreed, so they walked into a nearby tea house. Gu Changjiang looked at the plate closely for a long while, and he was more than excited after he was sure that it was real. He asked Gu Ning, Girl Gu, did you buy it because you knew that it was real? Gu Ning smiled, and explained. I wasn't very sure, but I thought that it was highly possible, so I bought it. Even if it's a fake, it's a beautiful plate. I could still use it as decoration. Gu Changjiang nodded. He thought highly of her courage and confidence. To distinguish real antiques relied on one's luck, vision, and courage. Like the middle-aged man, who had good luck but was not courageous enough to buy it, so he missed it. Girl Gu, may I ask, are you willing to sell it? Gu Changjiang asked. He indeed wanted to collect this pastel plate, as long as Gu Ning was willing to sell it to him. I can tell that you like this pastel plate, and of course I'm willing to sell to you if you want it, Gu Ning said. She didn't like this plate very much, and she could make friends with Master Gu by selling this plate to him. Really? Gu Changjiang was a little surprised that Gu Ning would agree with alacrity. Thank you so much. I won't deceive you either. This plate is worth around 1.5 million yuan, and I'll pay you 1.5 million yuan. I can give you a discount for a friend. 1 million yuan is enough, because it didn't cost me much money after all, Gu Ning said. No way. I don't want you to lose money, and I should pay you according to its market price. Gu Changjiang declined. Although this pastel plate didn't cost Gu Ning much money, it was worth a lot. Master Gu didn't want to take advantage of Gu Ning. Master Gu, please don't argue with me over money. It's no big deal. If you don't mind, I would like to call you my Grandpa Gu. If you're willing to make friends with me, please listen to me this time, Gu Ning said. Well, all right. I listen to you this time, since you're willing to call me your grandpa. Gu Changjiang compromised and had a good impression of Gu Ning. He had grandchildren who were the same age as Gu Ning, but they weren't by his side, and he missed them so much. After a while, Gu Ning and Leng Xiaoting left. The source of this content n/o/v/l by n. Gu Changjiang immediately called Qin Haoxing and told him what had just happened. Qin Haoxing was also astonished that Gu Ning knew antiques. This young girl was indeed full of surprises. And it was hard for him not to appreciate this outstanding young girl. He understood that Qin Yifan was upset because of Gu Ning these days, but it wasn't appropriate for him to get involved. As Qin Yifan's father, he had never forced him to date Li Xinxin or other girls from super-rich families. Although he didn't want Qin Yifan to be with an ordinary girl, he wouldn't stop him if he found his true love. Nevertheless, Qin Yiqing had already interfered in Qin Yifan's personal affairs, and Gu Ning had already rejected Qin Yifan. The Qin family could do nothing to change it. Siti called Gu Ning again around 5 p.m. And Leng Xiaoting drove Gu Ning to the appointed restaurant. He was reluctant to see Gu Ning having a meal with Siti, but he couldn't stop her. Siti was alone in the restaurant. If Leng Xiaoting hadn't told Gu Ning that Siti treated her differently, Gu Ning wouldn't have noticed it. How come Siti, as the head of the Qin gang, had time to dine with a teenage girl like her? And he even wanted to be with her alone, which meant that he did it on purpose. However, Siti didn't say anything special to Gu Ning, probably because he wasn't sure about his feelings yet. Gu Ning decided to stop it at the very beginning, because she didn't want it to end up like what had happened between Qin Yifan and her. It was too embarrassing for them to be friends now. In addition, she wasn't willing to lose support from the Qin gang. When they were about to finish the meal, Gu Ning received Leng Xiaoting's call. To let Siti know that she wasn't single, Gu Ning didn't avoid Siti but answered the call in a mild voice. Hi. Is it done yet? Leng Xiaoting asked. Yeah, almost, Gu Ning replied. I'm waiting for you outside now, Leng Xiaoting said. In fact, he had never left. He was worried that Siti would invite Gu Ning to watch a movie or shop together after the meal, so he called Gu Ning when he thought that they would almost be finished. Gu Ning absolutely understood what was on Leng Xiaoting's mind. Sure, I'll come to you later, Gu Ning said. Great, I'll wait for you. Leng Xiaoting was delighted. Siti heard their talk and sensed their relationship from Gu Ning's tone, and felt disappointed. Is he your boyfriend? Siti asked. Yes. Gu Ning said, and beamed with happiness. She looked in love. Then let's go now. I don't want to stop you from meeting your boyfriend. Siti was a considerate man, and he only felt slightly bitter in his heart. Nevertheless, he wasn't very sad, because he hadn't figured out his feelings towards Gu Ning. I'm so sorry. Please allow me to invite you to dine together the next time I'm in City G, Gu Ning said. It's fine, Siti replied. After that, they went outside together. Siti watched Gu Ning getting in the car, but he avoided seeing the man on the driver's seat. He knew that Gu Ning's boyfriend had to be as outstanding as she was. After Gu Ning got into the car, she asked Leng Xiaoting, "Were you waiting for me the entire time?" Gu Ning thought it was highly possible. Leng Xiaoting answered. What? Were you worried that he'd invite me to watch a movie together? Gu Ning teased. A man who was chasing a woman would always invite her to dine or watch a movie together. It was romantic to sit side by side watching a movie. Leng Xiaoting flushed a little, but didn't deny it. Gu Ning didn't know what to say, but it was a good chance to let Siti know that she already had a boyfriend. Have you eaten yet? Gu Ning asked. Yes. This time, Ling Xiaoting didn't wait for her in starvation. It wasn't a short time, so he had gone to eat in the middle. Where shall we go next? Gu Ning asked. No idea, Ling Xiaoting said. Then let's have a drive around. And I'll go back home later, Gu Ning proposed. In fact, as long as they were together, they felt happy and satisfied enough even just sitting in the car. Therefore, they decided to drive around the city and spend more time together. The traffic was heavy in the downtown, so Ling Xiaoting drove straight to the suburb. Gu Ning accidentally noticed Gu Qingxiang's car outside of a living area when they passed by. There was a woman sitting in it, and Gu Ning recognized that she was Gu Qingxiang's secretary. It wasn't unusual that a boss sent his secretary home, but Gu Ning had a sense that the relationship between Gu Qingxiang and his secretary wasn't simple. However, Gu Ning had no intention to investigate it any further. Although she didn't get along well with Gu Qingxiang's family, she had her moral standards. However, she did hope that Lin Lijuan found it out herself, and that it would be interesting. Gu Ning went back home when it was almost 9 p.m. Ling Xiaoting sent Gu Ning to the outside of G-Zone. The two had a long kiss again, and Ling Xiaoting was turned on once more. He was badly in need of a cold bath to clear his mind right now. Thus after Gu Ning disappeared from his sight, Ling Xiaoting ran to Su Jingshan's place and had a cold bath. He felt much better afterwards. During the following days, Gu Ning dined with Ling Xiaoting at noon and in the afternoon. Chu Peihan and others complained a lot about that, because Gu Ning didn't have time to train them now. Gu Ning thought for a while. Maybe it was the right time to introduce Ling Xiaoting to them, so she invited them to have a meal together on Wednesday afternoon. Knowing that they were going to meet their boss's boyfriend, everyone was excited. The minute the last class was over, Chu Peihan ran to the fourth classroom, but they hadn't finished yet. Chu Peihan loudly said to the teacher, "Hi, Mr. Zhang, the time is over." The teacher had planned to delay the class for 2 minutes longer, but Chu Peihan interrupted him. He glared at Chu Peihan, but Chu Peihan didn't care at all. Gu Ning didn't know what to say. After that, a group of them walked towards the outside. Chu Peihan and Hao Ren also urged them to be quick. They couldn't wait to meet their boss's boyfriend. "Oh, boss, which one of you is better at fighting?" Hao Ren suddenly thought of that question. "Oh, how could I forget? Your boyfriend is a military officer, so he must be really good at fighting. By the way, is your boyfriend a normal soldier or from the special forces? If he's from the special forces, it would be so cool," Chu Peihan said. And the rest all looked at Gu Ning for the answer. "He serves in the special forces, and he's better than me," Gu Ning said with pride. "Wow. Boss, you finally met someone who is better than you," Qin Zixuan said with excitement. "I lost the last time when I was in the competition with Siti too," Gu Ning said. "I think it was even," Zhang Tianping said. Outsiders couldn't tell the difference. Siti is better than our boss at skills, but he lost from the perspective of experience, because Situ is older and more experienced than our boss. However, he wasn't able to control the game and limit our boss, which was no different than a failure. Chu Peihan made her comment plainly. Undeniably, Chu Peihan told the truth. Peihan's right. That is to say our boss won anyway, Muku said. Everyone nodded. It sounds right, but in a real situation or battle, no matter if you're better at skills or experience, the point is to win. And we only competed for 5 minutes, which can't prove anything. I can only tell you that I had already tried my best, and that's it. Gu Ning wasn't defending Sitiyi, nor denying what Chu Peihan had just said. She just believed that there was only one winner in a competition, no matter why you won. Everyone agreed with Gu Ning and soon dropped the topic. When they got outside, the girls took Hao Ran's car, while the boys took a taxi. They all went to the Yuyi restaurant together. Gu Ning had already told Leng Xiaoting that they were going to meet her friends, so he booked a private room beforehand. Under the guidance of a waiter, they went to the private room and knocked on its door. "Come on in, please." Leng Xiaoting's voice sounded from inside. Then, Gu Ning followed by the others walked in. Leng Xiaoting immediately stood up to welcome them, but his sight fell on Gu Ning first as usual. Everyone was stunned when Leng Xiaoting appeared in their sight. The man was tall and strong. The air conditioner was on in the room, so he had taken off his coat and was wearing a tight black sweater, which accentuated his charming body very well. He also had outstanding features which composed a perfect face. Facing everyone's surprise, Leng Xiaoting didn't show any dislike at all, but he wasn't used to being the center of everyone's focus. "Come over and have a seat." Gu Ning opened her mouth and interrupted them. Chu Peihan suddenly said, "Nice to meet you, brother-in-law." Both Leng Xiaoting and Gu Ning were shocked, but the man was satisfied with the title. He knew that they all admired Gu Ning and respected her as their boss as well as the eldest sister. Since he was Gu Ning's boyfriend, it wasn't wrong that they called him brother-in-law. Gu Ning, on the other hand, felt a little uneasy. "Nice to meet you, brother-in-law," Hao Ran and the others said with one accord. "Nice to meet you too," Leng Xiaoting replied. Although he said it airily, nobody thought that he was being arrogant. Leng Xiaoting was a man of few words and wasn't good at making jokes, but he wasn't arrogant either. He respected everyone equally. Gu Ning, at the same time, had already told her friends about Leng Xiaoting's personality. Although he looked cold and quiet, he was reliable. Therefore, everyone was mentally prepared. However, Leng Xiaoting had the air of a king in their eyes, and so they behaved somewhat carefully before him. After the greeting, they were all seated. Gu Ning took off her coat, and Leng Xiaoting immediately helped her hang it up. Ariad updated estirise at n/vel/bin.com. A waiter came inside her, and Gu Ning let her friends order first. "Help yourself, please." "Of course. Since the meal is on our brother-in-law, we won't be shy," Chu Peihan said. "Exactly." The rest all agreed. Gu Ning didn't know what to say, but Leng Xiaoting enjoyed the approval from Gu Ning's friends. Although he only cared about Gu Ning's opinions, it wasn't a bad thing that her friends all liked him. He loved Gu Ning, and respected her friends too. Actually I have many questions to ask our brother-in-law, but I don't know whether it's the right time." "Well, you can answer my questions if you want, and we can drop the question if you're unwilling to answer it." "We just want to know more about you," Chu Peihan said. She had a burning desire to gossip. "Sure," Leng Xiaoting didn't reject. "How old are you and where do you live?" 26 and I live in the capital." "Do you have your own house?" "How much are your savings?" "I have a 600 square meter large quadrangle, 1. In architecture, a quadrangle or quad is a space or a courtyard, usually rectangular, square or oblong in plan, the sides of which are entirely or mainly occupied by parts of a large building or several smaller buildings, in the capital, and I'm not very clear about my savings." Jesus! Everyone was shocked, including Gu Ning. A 600 square meter large quadrangle in the capital. You must be super rich. The house price was crazily high in the capital, and a quadrangle in the downtown was worth at least hundreds of millions of yuan. "Do you mean your savings are too much for you to know the exact number?" Leng Xiaoting remained quiet. He didn't care much about money, so he had no idea how much savings he had till now. Everyone was shocked again. On my. You must be a man of high quality. It's so unreal. Chu Pei-han couldn't believe her ears. After a long breath, Chu Pei-han added, "Brother-in-law, are you sure you don't have any other girlfriends, or you are actually already married and simply playing with our boss?" Of course not. Chu Pei-han was stunned. Before long, the dishes were all on the table accompanied by beers. UW evils up tes on nov/l/bi.com. Except for Hao Ran and Lung shouting who were going to drive, the rest all enjoyed drinking. Since brother-in-law can't drink because he'll drive, then boss, you should drink some on behalf of him. Chu Pei-han proposed. Gu Ning didn't reject. It was no big deal for her to drink beers. They didn't drink much, because they were only having fun. After the meal, Hao Ran proposed to go to his V5 bar. However, Chu Pei-han disagreed. "I don't want to go to V5 bar every time. It gets boring. Let's go to Dihao Clubhouse this time. There is a boxing match at 10 p.m. Dihao Clubhouse belongs to the Qing gang and was a high-end entertainment place. They hired many professional boxers to perform boxing matches in the clubhouse, and they were open for challenges. Consumers could also bet, and the rate was 1:2. There weren't boxing matches every day, but they would post an announcement a day beforehand. Normally, there were 2 or 3 boxing matches within a week. During the days that boxing matches were held, the Dihao Clubhouse was always crowded, and the guests had to order tickets a day before. Oh, right. How could I forget? Hao Ran was thrilled and couldn't agree more to go to Dihao Clubhouse. Everybody else had the same idea. Most of them were interested in fighting, so they loved to watch boxing matches. Gu Ning didn't mind where they went next, so she just followed them. Ling Xiaoting didn't care about it either. He would go anywhere with Gu Ning. "It's very late now. Can we get tickets?" Mu Ku asked. Although he hadn't been there before, he knew the rules. "Don't worry, I'll handle it," Chu Pei-han said. Then she walked aside to call someone, because she didn't want the others to know about her connection with the Dihao Clubhouse. Chu Pei-han wasn't a member of the Qing gang, but she was familiar with all the senior management in City F. She visited Dihao Clubhouse often, so there was an exclusive private room with the best view reserved for her. She could go there whenever she wanted. However, she still needed to make a call first, and she told the workers in Dihao Clubhouse not to expose her real identity. After a while, Chu Pei-han went back and told them that the problem was solved. Then all the girls took Lin Xiaoting's car, while the boys went in Hao Ran's car, heading to Dihao Clubhouse. When they arrived at Dihao Clubhouse, it was only a little past 9 p.m., and it was too early for the boxing match. Meanwhile, all the guests tonight could join the lottery to win a great prize, but the prize that guests in the private rooms could win was much more valuable than that which the guests around the tables could get. If a guest in the private room won the top prize, the bill would be on the house tonight. However, the private room fee was excluded because a guest had to order a private room before he joined the lottery. Anyway, it didn't cost that much to order a table or a private room, but the price of food and drink here was much higher. However, the number of people was limited to 10. If there were more than 10 people around a table or in a private room, the extra people needed to pay 1/10 of the bill. There were only 9 people in Gu Ning and her friends group, so they met the standard. Gu Ning was responsible for choosing the red envelope from a black box. With the help of her jade eyes, she easily picked up the red envelope with the top prize. "Open it now! Do we get a prize?" Everyone was excited. Gu Ning opened the red envelope, and it was the top prize. All the rest of people in the room, including the waiter, were astonished. It was unusual for the guests to get the first, second or third prize, and it was the very first time that somebody had won the top prize. There were around 100 red envelopes in the black box, but there were only 50 private rooms in Dihao Clubhouse, so it was hard to win a prize. Wow! The top prize! I can't believe my eyes. Is it real? Boss, you're so amazing! Chu Pei-han hugged Gu Ning with excitement. Although Chu Pei-han had no intention to let them pay the bill tonight, it was good news that Gu Ning won the top prize. The hall in Dihao Clubhouse was very big, around 400 square meters. There was a flat area in the center that was 6 square meters wide. When there was a boxing match, it was a platform for boxing. If there was no boxing match, it would be a stage for dancing performances. All the private rooms on the second floor surrounded the hall. The side of the room that faced the central hall was a large floor-to-ceiling window, so that guests sitting inside could see the hall and platform clearly. In case some guests had bad sight, there were also 3 sets of binoculars in the room. Gu Ning and her friends were waiting in the room for the boxing match tonight. Before the boxing match began, they were chatting while drinking. Time flew, and Dihao Clubhouse was soon fully occupied by people. When it was almost 10 p.m., people started to shout. Chen Xing, Chen Xing, Chen Xing. Chen Xing worked for Dihao Clubhouse as a regular boxer. His best record was 9th in the national boxing competition 3 years ago, and had won the 3rd prize in the Southern Division. He had also been one of the top 50 in an international boxing competition. Although his record wasn't very impressive, he was a famous and skillful boxer. It wasn't easy to be a well-known boxer among thousands of boxers. In fact, there were many better boxers in the Qing gang, even the boxing champion, but those boxers all worked for bigger entertainment places and were open to challenges from more powerful opponents. City F was only a 3rd-tier city, so there weren't many boxing lovers, and it was already enough that they had a regular boxer. The Qing gang's headquarters were located in City G, which was a developing 2nd-tier city, but the legal business of the Qing gang mainly concentrated in a dominant city in the south, City Z. City Z was comparable with the capital to some extent. The boxers showed up when it was 10 p.m. The first boxer who went up to the platform was Chen Xing. Seeing Chen Xing, the audience was shouting and cheering even louder. Chen Xing, Chen Xing, Chen Xing. Chen Xing, fighting. Chen Xing, kill him. After Chen Xing was already standing on the platform, his opponent came out too. Lu Chang, Lu Chang, Lu Chang. Lu Chang, fighting. Lu Chang, kill him. Lu Chang was also a boxer who had won many prizes before, and he wasn't weaker than Chen Xing. Most importantly, there was a long-standing grudge between Lu Chang and Chen Xing. Lu Chang had lost a competition against Chen Xing last time, so he was eager to win. He came exactly for Chen Xing this time, so the boxing match tonight would be exciting. Lu Chang and Chen Xing glared at each other on the platform. Chen Xing, been a while. Lu Chang said to Chen Xing, but his attitude was apparently unkind. Follow US stories at nvl/by/n.com. Indeed. What a surprise that you come here for me. Do you want to lose again? Chen Xing said sarcastically. Lu Chang sneered, since you're open for challenges here, why can't I come? I did not say that, Chen Xing said. Lu Chang just snorted coldly, and didn't say another word. After that, the host introduced Lu Chang and Chen Xing one by one. In the private room, Hao Ran asked Gu Ning, "Boss, which one do you think is going to win?" I have no idea. They seem to be equal. Although Lu Chang has lost once, it doesn't mean that he'll lose again. Since he dares to challenge Chen Xing again, he must be confident in himself this time, Gu Ning said. What do you think? Hao Ran asked Chu Pei-han and others. I bet Qinxing in the beginning, but after what boss just said, I'm not sure, Qin Zixuan said. Even so, it's possible that Qinxing will beat Lu Chang down again. I still bet Qinxing, Chu Peihan added. Do you want to bet? Zhang Tianping proposed with excitement. Of course. It'll be boring if we don't while we're watching a boxing match, Hao Ran said. He pressed the service bell calling for a waiter. Except for Leng Xiaoting, Gu Ning and Yu Mixi, the rest all had a bet of 20,000 yuan each. Hao Ran, Qin Zixuan and Mu Ke bet on Lu Chang, while the others bet on Qinxing. The bet odds of Lu Chang was 1:3, and that of Qinxing was 1:2. The audience in the clubhouse bet gradually. The two boxers were equally good, and it was a hard decision for the audience to bet. In the end, the majority bet on Qinxing. The host walked down from the platform after the introduction. And the judge called the beginning of the match. Lu Chang and Qinxing couldn't wait and started fighting against each other violently. Their fists met in the air, and both of them were forced to step backwards by the other's strength. After a long breath, they attacked each other without delay. Qinxing treated his opponent seriously, even though Lu Chang had once lost in a competition against him, because Qinxing clearly knew that it hadn't been an easy victory. No one seemed to be in control after a while, and the match was growingly exciting. Everyone wanted to win the bet, so people kept shouting around the platform to encourage the boxers. As time went by, Qinxing started to gain control of this match, while Lu Chang kept avoiding his fists. However, right when the audience believed that Lu Chang would lose once more, he hit straight at Qinxing's face. Qinxing avoided it, but unexpectedly, Lu Chang turned around and took this chance, and a backswing directly hit Qinxing's cheek. As a professional boxer, his punch had at least 100 pounds of strength. Facing the great strike, Qinxing was knocked out, falling heavily into the boxing ring. No way! Everyone was shocked. How is it possible? Chu Peihan stood up abruptly from her seat. She couldn't believe her eyes. Qinxing was obviously about to win, so how come he lost all of a sudden? It's possible actually. There's no winner until the last second, Gu Ning smiled gently. To be honest, Gu Ning noticed that Lu Chang had been avoiding in order to find a great chance to give Qinxing a final punch. Gu Ning wasn't sure whether he could make it, but it seemed that he succeeded. On the platform, the judge started the countdown, 10, 9. Get up, now! The audience shouted louder and louder at Qinxing. Chu Peihan and the others included. 6, 5, the judge continued. Qinxing, come on, get up now. 3, 2, 1. In the end, Qinxing failed to stand up. Therefore, those who bet on Lu Chang won 3 times the amount of money, while those who bet on Qinxing all lost. The game was over. Those who bet on both Qinxing and Lu Chang won some and lost some. I wanted to bet on Qinxing in the beginning, but I changed my mind in the end, so I bet on Lu Chang, Hao Ran said, laughing out. Leave me alone! Chu Peihan was mad. It was nothing to lose some money, but she hated the feeling of failure. Why? I wasn't the only one who bet on Lu Chang, Hao Ran said on purpose. Chu Peihan was annoyed and turned her sight away from Hao Ran. All of a sudden, Gu Ning glanced at the opposite private room and noticed a familiar man. There were 3 men and 2 women sitting across from each other. Gu Ning recognized one of the men. It was Lu Jiangyu. Gu Ning had also met the 2 women in the shopping mall with Qian the other day. They were Qin Mingqi and her friend. Why is Lu Jiangyu with Qin Mingqi? Gu Ning was confused, but she wasn't clear about the real situation, so she decided to wait for a while longer. What's wrong? Noticing that Gu Ning was staring at the opposite private room, Leng Xiaoting asked her with curiosity. He looked over, following Gu Ning's sight, and saw the people in the opposite private room, but he didn't know them. I see a man that I know, but it seems to be a little strange, Gu Ning said, fixing her eyes on the opposite private room. Ling Xiaoting didn't ask further, nor bother her. Before long, Lu Jiangyu stood up, leaving the private room, and Qin Mingqi immediately took out a small paper package from her handbag. She opened it and poured some powder into Lu Jiangyu's wine glass. Gu Ning sensed that something had to be wrong. She stood up without hesitation. "Excuse me. I need to go out for a while." Her friends thought that Gu Ning was going to the ladies' room, so they didn't care much. Ling Xiaoting noticed the same scene, so he understood what Gu Ning was going to do. "Do you want me to go with you?" Hearing that, everyone gave Ling Xiaoting a glance, and thought that he was strange because they believed that he was going to the ladies' room together with Gu Ning. Ling Xiaoting, instead, was confused as to why they suddenly all looked at him like that. Gu Ning had no time to waste. "No, it's fine. I can handle it." "Great," Ling Xiaoting said. Gu Ning then ran straight to the opposite private room in case Lu Jiangyu would be trapped. Although she didn't know exactly what the white powder was, it had to be something terrible. Qin Mingqi had to be planning to sleep with Lu Jiangyu in an amoral way. Just as Gu Ning came out into the passage, Lu Jiangyu walked back into the room. Gu Ning knew that she had to stop him at once. Lu Jiangyu took his wine glass, and was about to drink. At this time, Gu Ning deliberately knocked the door heavily and made a loud sound. All the people sitting inside were sacred by the sound, and stopped drinking with one accord. Seeing that with her jade eyes, Gu Ning was relieved a little. "Who is it?" A man ached with impatience. He wasn't Lu Jiangyu. Gu Ning ignored him, but said, "Mr. Lu, I'm Gu Ning. It's urgent." All the other people witnessed Qin Mingqi putting the drugs into Lu Jiangyu's wine glass, but nobody said a word. Apparently, they were a group who planned to trap Lu Jiangyu together. Hearing that it was Gu Ning, Lu Jiangyu put his wine glass down, walking towards the door. Although he didn't know why Gu Ning was in a hurry, she was Qian's friend and he couldn't ignore her. Lu Jiangyu opened the door, saying to Gu Ning with care, "Miss Gu, may I help?" "It's you!" Qin Mingqi was quite surprised to see Gu Ning. The woman sitting beside Qin Mingqi was also astonished. Gu Ning gave Qin Mingqi a knowing glance, which made Qin Mingqi tremble unconsciously, but she didn't believe that Gu Ning knew what she was doing. "Do you know each other?" Lu Jiangyu asked. "Not really. We just met once only, but it was impressive," Gu Ning said with great interest. Qin Mingqi's face changed, and immediately interrupted her, "Stop that." "What?" "Miss Qin, I haven't finished yet, so why do I have to stop?" "And why are you panicking?" Gu Ning lifted the corners of her lips, and asked in a meaningful way. Qin Mingqi was mad, but didn't know how to retort. "Miss Gu, what emergency do you have?" Lu Jiangyu noticed that Gu Ning didn't get along with Qin Mingqi, but he didn't want to delay Gu Ning's emergency. "It's fine now. And I just want to have a glass of wine with Miss Qin." "May I come in?" Gu Ning said, then walked inside directly. Everyone was surprised by Gu Ning's sudden movement. With Lu Jiangyu's presence, Qin Mingqi couldn't reject, so she answered, "Sure, it's nothing." Then she raised her wine glass. There was a new glass beside, and Lu Jiangyu poured the wine for Gu Ning. "Miss Qin, let's change glasses." Gu Ning wore an evil smile, and handed Lu Jiangyu's wine glass to Qin Mingqi. La test novls on n/co. Everyone was shocked and panicked. "Does she know?" "No, it's impossible." "How could she know?" "Miss Gu, this wine glass is mine." Lu Jianyu didn't understand why Gu Ning did that, became there was already a wine glass in Chen Mingqi's hand. Miss Gu, what do you want to do? I have a wine glass already, so why do I have to use another person's glass? Chen Mingqi tried her best to stay calm. Even though Gu Ning found out her secret, she wouldn't admit it. What? Is it a big deal? It's a new glass of wine, Gu Ning said. Chen Mingqi of course wouldn't drink the wine in the glass. Miss Gu, Lu Jianyu didn't know what Gu Ning was doing, but her behavior was very unusual. Mr. Lu, if you trust me, please stay quiet for a moment, Gu Ning said calmly. Lu Jianyu was a businessman and he instantly sensed that something must be wrong after Gu Ning's reminder. Why won't Gu Ning let the wine glass go? Is there something else in the wine? Lu Jianyu suddenly figured it out and was displeased. However, since Gu Ning told him to be quiet for a moment, he decided to wait for what was going to happen next. The other two men were afraid to expose themselves, so they criticized Gu Ning. Miss, Mingqi has her own wine glass, so why do you have to force her to use another one? Exactly, even though you're Executive Li's friend, we'll call the security guards if you don't stop. Very well, please call the security guards right now. I think you better call the police too, Gu Ning beamed and didn't seem frightened at all. Their faces changed again. If they call the police, they could be exposed. And now they were certain that this young girl had to know something. The question was how. Lu Jianyu didn't miss any detail, and he realized that they probably did something together behind his back. Are you going to drink it, or not? Gu Ning stared at Chen Mingqi coldly. Chen Mingqi was mad as well as terrified, and failed to say a word. You don't want to drink it by yourself? Let me help you then. Gu Ning sneered. Before Chen Mingqi could react, Gu Ning forced her mouth open wide and poured the drink straight down her throat. The wine glass in Chen Mingqi's hand smashed into pieces on the ground, but she was too terrified to care about that. However, she resisted in vain, and the drink was in her stomach now. The rest of the people were all shocked, but it was too late to stop it. Gu Ning let Chen Mingqi go afterwards, and the latter almost choked to death trying to get the drink out. Chen Mingqi glared at Gu Ning, but she could do nothing now. Within seconds, Chen Mingqi fainted falling on the sofa. The other two men were frightened and didn't dare to utter a word. Who did this? Lu Jianyu was furious. A man immediately explained, Executive Lu, it has nothing to do with us. It was Chen Mingqi's idea. Exactly. Chen Mingqi did it herself, and we know nothing about it at all. We just wanted to see what she was going to do, so we stayed quiet. Please forgive us, another man begged. Although they had cooperation with Lu Jianyu, they were barely comparable to him. If Lu Jianyu ended their deal, their company could lose a fortune. Even Chen Mingqi's friend claimed that it was Chen Mingqi's own idea. Then you should know why she did it. Gu Ning questioned. In fact, she already knew the answer from Chen Mingqi's attitude towards Lu Jianyu. She liked Lu Jianyu, but Lu Jianyu loved Qian, thus Chen Mingqi planned to drug Lu Jianyu and sleep with him. Gu Ning was right. She liked Executive Lu, but Executive Lu doesn't like her, so she planned to sleep with Executive Lu and get pregnant. In that case, Executive Lu would be hers, Chen Mingqi's female friend said. There was dense hatred in Lu Jianyu's eyes. He knew that Chen Mingqi liked him, but he had already told her that he loved Qian. Chen Mingqi never mentioned it again, and he had thought that she had given up on him. However, to his astonishment, she was scheming behind his back. If it hadn't been for Gu Ning, he would have been trapped. If he had been trapped, he would feel disgusted and Qian probably wouldn't give him any hope. Thinking of that, Lu Jianyu was increasingly mad. His cold sight like sharp knife glanced over the two men. Since she wants a man, then you two have to keep her company tonight. If you dare to disobey my order, I'll end the deal with your company at once. Lu Jiangyu wasn't weak. Whoever tried to trap him, he would pay the person back, and it didn't matter if he or she succeeded or not. Although it was Qin Mingqi who had put the drug into his drink, the two men hid the truth, which made them accomplices, so Leng Xiaoting naturally wouldn't let them get away with it. The two men were terrified, and answered immediately, "Yes, sir." They didn't dare to resist at all now, unless they wanted to lose their jobs. Besides, men seldom refuse to sleep with a beautiful woman, especially those two. Qin Mingqi was pretty and sexy. They had wanted her for a long time, but Qin Mingqi disliked them. In addition, Qin Mingqi was from a rich family, so they didn't dare to use force. Since Lu Jiangyu ordered them to do so now, they were more than willing to do it. After that, Lu Jiangyu left with Gu Ning. "Miss Gu, thank you so much for helping me. Otherwise, I could have been trapped already, but could you please tell me how you found out?" "I just left for a minute," Lu Jiangyu said to Gu Ning. Gu Ning replied, "I was sitting in the private room right across from yours, and I accidentally saw you sitting with Qin Mingqi, so I was curious. I met Qin Mingqi in a shopping mall within Qian last week, and I know about your relationship. Thus I wondered why you two were together. Unexpectedly, when you went out, she immediately put white powder into your wine glass. Although I wasn't sure what it was, it would be a bad thing if you were drugged. Therefore, I ran to you without delay. Luckily, I arrived on time." Thinking of what had just happened, Lu Jiangyu still felt mad, but he was surprised by Gu Ning's good sight. "You could see me from the other side? Your sight is so unbelievable." There was a distance of 10 meters at least between the two rooms. "Yeah, my sight is much better than that of a normal person's," Gu Ning laughed. "Oh, you must be here with your friends, right?" Lu Jiangyu asked. "Yes, do you want to come and join us?" "An Yi is with us too," Gu Ning invited. An Yi and An Qian were cousins, so Lu Jiangyu was familiar with him. "No, thanks. I'm not in the mood now," Lu Jiangyu declined. "Well, it's fine," Gu Ning didn't insist. "And, please don't tell An Qian about this." "I don't want to worry her," Lu Jiangyu said. "Sure," Gu Ning replied. After that, Lu Jiangyu left and Gu Ning went back to her private room. Top VL updates on n/o/v/lb/in.com. Gu Ning continued to play with her friends, and Leng Xiaoting had been focusing on her all the time, so he didn't ask anything. Lu Jiangyu went downstairs to the counter. He planned to order something for Gu Ning, but found out that Gu Ning had won the top prize and had free food as well as drinks tonight. Well, that's all for this part, truckers. See you all in the next video.